The first step. I checked out of my lodge and stepped out onto the crowded street. Spotting a cycle rickshaw, I waved it down. Where to? Said the rickshaw driver. Ghat. Which ghat? There are so many here. I wasn't prepared for this. How was I to know there were many ghats in Varanasi? Just take me to any ghat. I can't take you to just any ghat, sir. Then you will say this is not where you wanted to go. All right, name a ghat. Dashishvame to ghat. Fine, take me there. I hadn't been on a rickshaw since 1995. Back then, 15 years ago, I was a teenager attracted to and working towards materialism. Now, at 30, I was doing exactly the opposite. The vehicle hadn't changed, but the direction had. The person hadn't changed, but the priorities had. I presumed I was headed to a quiet riverside, but I couldn't be more wrong. The ghat was crowded beyond description, like an agitated mind crowded with thoughts, like ants gathered on a dead insect. India was hardly new to me. I had spent the first 18 years of my life in this country, but rather naively I had expected a different India in Varanasi. An old image was locked in my head, an image I hadn't seen but conjured up while reading medieval texts. Kashi by the Ganges, an ancient town full of scholars, saints, tantrics, yogis and other spiritually inclined people. I roamed about for a while, not knowing where to go. A long time ago I had heard about Om Swami, a realized soul who had lived in Kashi more than a century ago. There was supposed to be a monastery at the site of his samadhi. I visualized a quiet monastery by the Ganges, where noble sadhaks sat under the shade of old banyan trees and focused on their sadhana under the guidance of a venerable guru. I inquired, but no one knew anything about the monastery. I thought of visiting the only other place I'd heard of in this city, Manikarnika Ghat, a cremation ground by the river where dead bodies were burnt round the clock. I hoped to meet some tantric, sitting there and performing esoteric rituals by the burning pyres. I marched back to the main road and stopped another cycle rickshaw. It was nearly noon and the heat was biting me. I tried to tell myself that it was only mid-March, but this intellectual balm failed to soothe my body. Will you take me to Manikarnika Ghat? Yes, sir, but I can't go all the way there. I can drop you at the nearest point. How much? Rs20. I hopped into the rickshaw, which moved slowly but steadily on the busy road. Several times the rickshaw driver had to actually get down to maneuver it through the crowd. I noticed he was barefoot even though the sun was spewing fire and the road was like a field of burning coal. It just exuded heat. Why aren't you wearing any slippers? They got stolen at the temple the day I bought them. I don't know this area. Please stop by a footwear shop. I'd like to get slippers for you. I'll manage, brother. What is your name? Mahesh Kumar. Don't worry, Mahesh. I'll still give you the money for the ride. A little later I spotted a small shoe shop. Mahesh wasn't keen on stopping, so I practically had to order him to halt. Getting off the rickshaw, I gestured to him to follow me into the shop. He came in after me sheepishly. Hello, sir, the shopkeeper said and asked me to sit down. I beckoned to Mahesh, who was hovering near the entrance, to join me on the sofa. He did so extremely reluctantly. A young worker at the shop offered me water. Please give it to Mahesh, I said. He's your customer today. Do you want sandals instead of slippers? That may be better, I said to Mahesh. Whatever you think is best. The sales assistant went to the back of the shop and returned a few minutes later with a pair of sandals. Beige in colour with dark brown straps and shining steel buckles, they looked very comfortable. He handed Mahesh the pair. Please put them on his feet like you would do for any other customer, I said. Mahesh looked at me nervously. I looked into his eyes and nodded. Immediately his face broke into a smile and he stuck out his feet so that the assistant could put on the sandals. I looked at Mahesh's beautiful, dark face, his yellow teeth, slightly deformed and stained, his big eyes full of contentment, and felt very warm inside. His smile simply made my day. Mahesh pedaled with renewed enthusiasm now, while his dusty, worn feet seemed to come alive in the new sandals. As I watched his feet pushing the pedals up and down, everything else faded for a moment. The shops, the noise, the heat. All I could see were those feet, which seemed to be performing a cosmic dance. Now a pedal went up and now a pedal came down. Every movement seemed effortless in perfect synchronization. Mahesh dropped me off at the point closest to Manikarnika Ghat. If you go to the temple again, don't leave your shoes outside, I warned as I got off the rickshaw. I won't, he said. I offered him a 50 rupee note. How can I take money from you, sir? Please keep this, it will give me great joy if you do. He came around from his rickshaw and reached down to touch my feet. I caught his wrists and pulled him up. There are only 3 places you should bow your head, I said. In front of God, in front of the elderly, and in front of your guru. I thrust the money into his hands and walked away, thinking that Mahesh was not designed to be a rickshaw driver. He could have been a clerk, a watchman, an officer, an executive. For that matter, no one deserved to live a life that sought to break the body as well as the spirit. This man was living in a democratic country, but did that make him a free man? The state did not provide for him, and his fellow countrymen did not respect him. He did not have the freedom to own a roof over his head or break away from the harshness and drudgery of his daily routine. I don't think Mahesh ever took a vacation or enjoyed any luxury in his life, except perhaps the luxury of needs. He would never run out of needs. Come to think of it, there was no difference between him and me. We were both fettered by our needs. His were more tangible and essential for survival, while mine were more abstract and self-imposed. I navigated my way to Manikarnika Ghat. I doubt if anywhere else in India there existed such tight streets as in Varanasi. At least I'd never seen them. If you had a slightly bigger nose and turned your head, you were likely to hit something. Well, almost. I don't know how I managed to reach Manikarnika Ghat, but I finally did. A pyre was burning. Another had been mostly reduced to ash, occasionally lit up by smouldering embers. Pieces of broken clay pots lay scattered around. Breaking a pot full of water at the time of cremation is a Hindu custom signifying that the soul of the deceased has severed all ties with the human world. The pot symbolizes the human body, and its breaking indicates the liberation of the soul that has trapped within. There were no saints to be found here, no practitioners of the occult sciences, no evolved tantrics or yogis who beckoned to me to join them in a journey to self-realization. Instead, around the pyres, dealers sat selling wood. Beside them sat panwallahs and chaiwallahs. Milling around were countless people, cows, dogs and cats. The ghat had turned out to be a disappointment, so I began asking about Telang Swami's monastery again. Of the many souls I asked, one seemed to know. He pointed in a certain direction. I walked down narrow streets with decrepit buildings ready to crumble and shops selling all manner of things. Dodging the maddening traffic, I found myself in winding alleyways, going past houses standing cheek by jowl and children playing beside parked two-wheelers, doing my best to avoid stepping into puddles of animal urine and dung. After 45 minutes, feeling tired and hopeless, I stopped. I couldn't see the monastery and I couldn't find anyone who had ever seen it. I sat down on the curb and wiped the sweat off my forehead, wondering how to proceed. After a few minutes I raised my head and there it was on my right, a sign written in Hindi, Telang Swami Math. It was a temple. I went inside. A middle-aged man was sitting on the pujari's seat. Everything about him was round, head, face, torso, belly, hands, feet. A barber came in behind me, took his kit out of his bag and began shaving the priest. I watched quietly, enjoying the coolness of the temple after the searing heat outside. After a few minutes the barber picked up his things and left. No money exchanged hands. Perhaps they had some kind of monthly arrangement. I asked the priest about Telang Swami and his lineage, and about the monastery. He said there was no disciplic succession or ashram. This temple was all there was, and there was no arrangement for anyone to stay even if they could pay. I felt betrayed, although I was not sure by whom. Telang Swami is buried there. He pointed to a corner of the temple compound. Walking across to Telang Swami's tombstone, I prayed, "Please guide this lost soul, O Swami, so I may attain what I've set out to do." On my way out, the priest stopped to ask exactly what I was looking for. I told him I was in search of a guru and wanted to take sannyasa diksha, initiation into the life of a renunciant. He said there was no need to renounce the world or look for a guru, and that I should get married and lead a normal life. Normal life? There's nothing called a normal life. What is normal from one's viewpoint may be most abnormal from another's. A yogi thinks that the world is abnormal and people live like animals, mostly focused on feeding and fornicating. The world thinks the yogi is a fool who wastes his life sitting around doing nothing, enjoying none of the many pleasures life has to offer. Naturally, I didn't say any of this to the priest. I had no interest in pursuing a conversation with someone who could understand neither my desperation nor my intention. I went towards the ghats again. It was nearly 3 p.m. and the sun was even hotter now. I hadn't eaten anything all day. In the morning, I hadn't been able to find any place to eat where the food wasn't deep-fried. In the afternoon, I was busy with my self-realization business. My water bottle had been empty for hours, and the reality of hunger was tugging hard at my stomach. Lacking a sense of direction, I didn't know if I was heading towards the ghats or away from them. When I saw the number of people on the streets reduce significantly, I knew I was heading in the wrong direction. Coincidentally, I saw some lodges there and asked a few if they had any vacancy. I just wanted to lie down in a cool, quiet place. Oddly enough, at each place, they asked me where I was from, how many people needed the room, and for how many days. Then they would tell me there was no room available. I was intrigued. Why would they put me through a whole heap of questions if they had no room available? I walked on and eventually found myself by the river. The Hindu texts talked a great deal about the sacred significance of Ganga Maya. Well, her children had polluted her beyond imagination. Seeing the filthy state of the river flowing past me, I shook my head in as much disgust as disbelief. I had seen the Ganga till Haridwar, where it was clean, but what had happened here in this holiest of holy cities, the Kashi of my imagination, I decided I would not bathe in the river here. Inwardly, though, I paid obeisance to the sacred Ganga. A Ma remains a Ma no matter how she's dressed. Massage, I looked up to see a man standing near me. No massage, I need a guide. Sure, sir, I'll be your guide. You do know this area well. Yes, sir. What will you charge? I need you with me for the rest of the day, and maybe tomorrow as well. You can pay whatever you like, Rs 25 per day. Okay, sir. Let's go. I'll take your bag, he offered kindly. It took me a few minutes to realize I was free of the load. That's the thing with baggage, you get used to carrying it around. You know it's heavy, but the weight has a way of becoming a part of your life, only when you take it off your back and feel the lightness does the awareness of the load hit you. Manish took me to a couple of guest houses, and I got the same questions there too. Finally, my guide solved the mystery for me by explaining that when the employees at these lodges weren't busy with work or occupied watching a cricket match on TV, they longed to chat with people as a way of passing their time. They didn't have any rooms available, but a conversation with a stranger was welcome. Not getting very far in my search for a place to stay, I asked Manish to take me to a bigger hotel, but he said there weren't any. I realized that he didn't really know the area, he had lied to me. Anyway, I was starving now. We managed to spot a vegetarian Jain dhaba that served meals without onion or garlic. I avoided eating onion and garlic, so the menu was fine with me, but the food wasn't. It was tasteless. I was too tired to fuss and my head hurt. I swallowed whatever I was served, though my guide seemed to savor the meal. After we left the dhaba, I bought 2 chilled bottles of water from a small provision store. Opening the first one, I washed my face and poured the rest on my head. The second I guzzled right away. It was nearly 6 p.m. by the time we resumed our hunt for accommodation, and we finally got lucky at Pooja Guest House, where they gave me a room. I let Manish go and asked him to come again the next morning. Even though I had a room now, I couldn't sleep because of the fatigue and dehydration, which was evident from the colour of my urine. I hadn't known I was so fragile. There was a time not long ago when I had played badminton daily, spent hours at a stretch on the golf course, pumped iron and run 12 miles regularly, and all this had felt effortless. But today, just one day spent in the real world, and I found myself stretched beyond what I could take. My belief that I was fit and strong seemed merely a conceited notion. I realized that my body was far from ready for the hardships of monkhood. If I couldn't even tolerate the heat of a day, what chance did I have to endure the rigors of meditation and the harsh life of an ascetic? I had no idea how to prepare my body for intense penance, yet I knew that life would teach me. I had only to be open and willing. I lay there thinking about my worldly journey thus far, the mystic. My mother was raised in a deeply religious environment and grew up revering religious figures. She would never lose an opportunity to seek the darshan of mystics and saints who visited our town. One day during the lunch hour at work, she went to get the blessings of an unusual saint she had been told about. It was said that he never slept, he didn't even blink. He observed silence most of the time. Perpetually wandering, he wouldn't stay more than one night in a place, and he never returned to the same town again. In the month of Margashirsha, when the moon is waxing, you will give birth to a special soul, he said as soon as he saw my mother. My mother was brought up not to question saints, but she wasn't expecting this blessing from the mystic who rarely spoke. Babaji, I already have 2 children. It doesn't matter, the sadhu said. One of us is coming after a long wait, a saint. My mother's heart sank. One of them, a saint. That meant he wouldn't lead a normal life but give up everything. She lowered her head and sat quietly, trying to calm herself. Yes, he will renounce, he said, reading her mind. Please remember me when he is born, and touch some tulsi leaves to his lips as an offering from me. She bowed before him and got up to leave. Her thoughts were in turmoil. Her family was already complete and there was no need to have a third child. Yet the thought of losing this third child, to have him become a wandering sadhu, was unbearable. You are merely the medium. Don't resist the ways of the divine, the saint said as he gave her a pinch of holy ash. Eat this ash on Ekadashi. At his birth, petals will shower from above and a rainbow will be seen. My birth might have been foretold, but it certainly wasn't planned. My father would tell me later. After losing their first child, my parents had gone on to have a boy and a girl, and were neither planning nor hoping for a third child. But 15 months after the holy man's prediction, in the month of Margshirsha, on the 12th night of the waxing moon, I was born in a government hospital. Except for a light drizzle, nothing else fell from the sky and there was no rainbow in sight. I was delivered before my father or other relatives could even reach the hospital. The customary gutti, the giving of honey to the newborn baby, usually done by mother's brother, was given by a nurse instead. My mother had remembered to carry the tulsi with her though. Squeezing 3 leaves between her thumb and fingers, she touched the juice to my lips. My father reached half an hour after I was born and named me Amit. Hoping she might avoid what was written in the book of fate, my mother kept the mystic's prediction to herself. It was only after my renunciation, more than 30 years later, when she saw me in my ochre robes, that she would reveal what had transpired long years ago. The years went by and I was now 5. The summer vacation had just started. One day my parents were at the office while my siblings and I were at home. Rajan and Didi were playing outside, but I wasn't interested in their games. Looking for something else to occupy me, I began browsing through the cupboard in the living room and came upon a stack of comics in the bottom shelf. Curious, I sat down on the floor and began to flip through the pages. Within moments, I was entranced by the attractive illustrations, though I didn't think I could read the sentences. But when I paid attention to the dialogue bubbles, much to my surprise, letter by letter, word by word, the sentences formed. This was my first experience of reading sentences. My mother used to tell me bedtime stories every night, but I now discovered a whole new world of stories. Every word I read filled me with an inexplicable joy, and I remember giggling as I read. It was as if a narrator was talking to me personally, telling me those wonderful tales. I felt I was walking with someone through a dark forest, being guided by the lamp he was holding up for me. With every step we took, the space before us lit up and a whole new world unfurled. I sat there reading one issue after another as the morning rolled by. Finally, Didi came in to ask me to eat. It was lunchtime. I ignored her. I didn't want food, I wanted stories. She came again, and I sent her away each time. She was only 11 herself, but being the eldest, was responsible for giving me the lunch my mother had made for us before leaving for work. It's already 4 p.m. You must have your lunch now. I kept reading. Amit. I didn't answer. Amit, I'm talking to you. I don't want to eat. She gave me a peck on my cheek and said, It's very late. Please have your lunch. She knew it was impossible to push me into anything, even if it was in my own interests. Love was the only way. Okay, after 5 minutes. You've been saying that all day. I promise this time. Didi came back half an hour later and the same conversation took place. I asked for more time, but she was having no more of this behavior. Heating my lunch, she brought it to me. I'm not hungry, I said without looking at her. Please, you must eat, she said. Mummy and Papa will be home soon. I must finish my comics, Didi. Please don't disturb me. She prepared a bite of chapati, vegetables, lentils and pickle and brought it close to my mouth just below my nose. My mouth watered and I let her put the food into my mouth, reading all the while. I don't know how many chapatis she fed me, but I ate whatever she gave. I kissed her cheek and went back to reading. It was my favorite habit, kissing my mother and sister every morning and evening. On the days I was happier, I did so more frequently. They looked after me with great love and I always felt secure and happy with them. As she got up to take my plate away, Didi said, I'm glad you ate. Me will be relieved. My parents worked in the same government organization, though in different departments. For nearly 3 decades, they had left the house together every morning and returned together in the evening. My father drove a scooter while my mother sat sideways behind him in a ladylike fashion. Paisiala was a small town and their office was only 15 minutes away. Like my parents, half of this town worked for the state electricity board, the other half worked for a nationalized bank. Or something like that. One day, our family of 5 went out for dinner. Next to the restaurant was a shop outside which scores of magazines and comics were on display. Within, shelf upon shelf was crammed with books from floor to ceiling. I didn't know such places existed and was overwhelmed at the sight of these books. I was a tiny piece of iron and here was a giant magnet. It was impossible to resist and I couldn't think of anything else. My dinner, the restaurant, my family, all of it ceased to matter. I had to be in that bookshop and have every comic and magazine of my interest. My father promised to take me there after the dinner, but I couldn't wait. I insisted on going right away, and he finally gave in. Till now I had only seen magazines and comics being delivered at home with the newspaper. I hadn't even realized you had to buy them separately. I thought they just came with the newspapers. Buy, this was the keyword. You needed money to buy them. If I had a lot of rupees, I could have bought all the books in the shop. Back at the restaurant, I couldn't stop adoring the magazines I just bought. At home, I couldn't sleep because I wanted to read them. At school the next day, I couldn't concentrate because I wanted to get back home and read. The more comics and magazines I read, the more I wanted to read. My obsession only got worse with time. Whenever my parents wanted to buy something for me, I asked for books. But how many could they buy after all? There was a limit. So my first visit to the library was scheduled. It was nearly 5 km away from our home, and on my way there, I felt like an astronaut on his first space trip. When I entered the library, the visual stimulation and intellectual arousal I experienced at the sight of so many books was beyond what my little mind could assimilate. I looked at the librarian and thought he was the luckiest man in the world, for he could read all these books. He had no smile on his face, though. Almost daily I read for a couple of hours at the library, took 2 books home, finished them and exchanged them the next day for 2 more. 2 was the limit per person. Do you actually finish the books you take home every day? The librarian asked me once. Yes, I do. What's the rush? Why don't you enjoy them and read them? Slowly, section. I do enjoy them, uncle, but I want to read all the books in this. He laughed. No one has ever done that. He was right. I never got around to reading every book in the children's section. Still, after all the time I spent there, and 12 library cards, more than 1,400 books, and 2 years later, he gave me a box of sweetmeats. Many tales in the various magazines and books I read featured gods who would slay demons, create miracles, grant boons and help those who prayed to him. He could fly, he could appear and disappear at will, he could shift shapes, he could do anything he wished. And every story I read I assumed to be true. I started building my world around God, with God in God. I wanted to see him, I wanted to talk to him. I didn't like him being invisible. Perhaps God had appeared before people in ancient times, and maybe it was no longer possible to see him. An incident, however, changed my perception. One evening, when I came back into the house after playing outside, I saw my mother sitting by the altar reading a thick book. I threw my arms around her and kissed her. What are you reading, Mummy? Ramcharitmanas, the story of Lord Rama. Haven't you finished it yet? You are always reading this book. She laughed. This is our holy book, son. This is about God. Each time I read it, I receive something new. Is Lord Rama God? Yes. Then what about Lord Shiva and Lord Krishna? I pointed to the 2 pictures at the altar. They are all God, the same God, just different names, different forms. Where is he then? Why can't I see him in real life? He is everywhere. Those pure of heart see him, those who worship him see him. But you worship him, why don't you see him? My worship is not the purest. Sometimes I have to tell a lie and God doesn't like lying. Only those who always speak the truth see him. Why do you have to lie sometimes, Mummy? And can I see him too? Yes, why not? And she narrated the story of the 5-year-old prince Durva, who went to the woods to pray to Lord Vishnu and saw a manifestation of the divine form. I shivered. Can I read this book as well? Of course I'll read it with you. No, don't read it with me, only help me if I get stuck. That day she was reading the Uttarakhand, the last chapter of the Ramcharitmanas, and I glanced at the page she was on. She told me that it was the Rudrashtakam, a eulogy to Lord Shiva. It was written in simple Sanskrit. Since Hindi and Sanskrit shared the same script, I began reading. After some sentences I got stuck at a long word, Safa Namorli Kalalina Charuganga. My mother helped me with the pronunciation, and told me that it meant, from the matted locks on Shiva's head gushes forth the beautiful Ganga. I didn't know what the eulogy meant, but the rhythm and the sound drew me in. I felt different, as if something had melted within me. From devouring candies to being awake well past my bedtime, I had experienced various kinds of childish delights and felt good on many occasions, but this was a different feeling altogether. This was not a wave of happiness that rose and ebbed, but the gentle flow of a river of strange joy. It seemed to me that I had just experienced God. For the first time, I sensed that it was possible to see him. I used to sleep with my mother and demanded a story every night. She knew countless legends from various scriptures. That night she narrated the story of Krishna and his childhood friend, Sudama. Krishna loved him deeply and granted the poverty-stricken Sudama material comforts in the blink of an eye. Moved by the beautiful story, I slept with thoughts of God and with the conviction that he did exist. A fair-complexioned Shiva with a slightly bluish throat appeared in my dream that night. His face was exquisite, his nose sharp and his lips pink and full. Silver earrings hung from long ears. Matted locks were tied in a knot on top of his head, and his broad shoulders glistened with drops of water, as if he had just come from the snowy Himalayas and the snowflakes had melted on his skin. In one of those drops of water, I saw my own reflection. He gazed at me with soft, loving eyes. "I've come to see you," he said. "Oh, you are Lord Shiva, you must meet my mother." He smiled and stroked my head tenderly, his fingers long and slender. "I've only come for you." "No, you must meet my mother, please. She really wants to see you. She prays to you every day." But he, the foremost yogi, disappeared. I woke up my mother. Lord Shiva came. I asked him to wait for you, but he didn't." Then I began crying. "I asked him to wait. I wanted you to see him. He was so beautiful. God was here, Mummy. Lord Shiva was here." She sought to pacify me, but the more she tried, the louder I cried. I couldn't bear for her to be excluded from my dream, not belong to a place where God and I existed, but she didn't. I could not imagine a life without my mother. "Stop crying, son," she said lovingly. "I'll pray to Lord Shiva to wait for me the next time." Was it real? Did he really come? Are dreams real, Mummy? Yes, of course it was real. Even though I was barely 8 summers old at the time, I still remember how I had felt that night. I couldn't go back to sleep, not because my mind had any questions, but because I was already in a state of deep tranquility, beyond sleep. Such was the touch of Shiva. I started to lose the sense of my individual self, and felt I was becoming one with the vast and silent ocean that looked up at the endless sky. There were no boundaries and no resistance, only the expanse of blue ocean and sky, only peace, light, and joy. My young body of a few years had just discovered my million-year-old soul. A couple of years went by. 10 now. I had stopped reading comics and moved on to books. On the outside I was mostly happy, but deep within I craved to see God again, not in a dream but in full consciousness. I found myself deeply restless. I didn't just want to know more about him. I wanted to know him because I believed only he could answer the questions that dogged me constantly. Why was the world the way it was, and why was I the way I was? Why was it that some people lived in big houses while others slept on the road? Why did people fall ill and die? Neither my friends nor my elders could hold a reasoned conversation with me, much less address these questions. Nearly a year passed as I searched in vain for answers. I finally turned to numerology, astrology and other esoteric disciplines, hoping they would bring me the clarity I sought. My mother knew a learned Brahmin, Pandit Suresh Sharma, who agreed to teach me astrology. From him, I understood the significance of the planets and planetary positions. He taught me how to draw the charts, how to normalize zodiac signs based on longitude and latitude, and so on. I studied all the major classical and contemporary works on astrology. These books had explanations and even remarkable insights for me, but no answers. I had read that the sages, authors of the classical astrological texts, had received divine knowledge by way of divination. Clearly, they must have had a way to receive and interpret that knowledge. Why did the divine talk to them and not to me? Seers who wrote marvelous works of great profundity and foresight had something in common. Living in secluded spots in mountains and forests, they chanted Vedic hymns and meditated on God. I couldn't go and live in the woods, but I could sit still and try to meditate on God, I thought. I began meditating at every available opportunity, even though I had no real guidance or practical understanding of meditation. My method at the time was to sit still and chant Om. That's what I did. Whenever I had an hour to spare, I meditated. A subtle change did start to come about. I often found myself at the intersection of time where the lines between the past, present, and future blurred. It was like déjà vu, but with one difference. I could see what the next moment would hold. Just as a flash of lightning illuminates the dark sky for a moment, and you see everything around you in its full glory, these flashes of intuition revealed to me information about the person sitting before me that I simply didn't know. Sometimes visitors would come for readings, and I would know their questions even before they had started speaking. At times, I would be walking in the street and would get similar guidance about a complete stranger walking on the road. I wasn't just seeing people but seeing through them. I wasn't sure how to label this phenomenon. I called it intuition, but there was a small problem with my intuition. It was wild and free. It ran its own course and I had no control over it. Even though it worked, I couldn't call upon it with conviction or at will, nor replicate it whenever I wished. I wanted a more logical sequence, a degree of certainty. I needed my inner guide to answer my questions, and not just give me random information about a stranger on the road, no matter how accurate that was. In the meantime, word spread about my readings in astrology, and more people started approaching me. Going to school, reading, meditating, and meeting people made my schedule rather hectic, and there was little time left to play. I didn't mind this because, being asthmatic, I could not engage much in physical sports. There were no inhalers back then, not until I turned 14 anyway. For 4 months every year, March, April, and September, October, I was particularly sick. There was a high level of allergens during these months, and the medication would take a while to ease my breathing. For long hours at night, I used to sit outside with my mother because lying down made breathing even more difficult. Resting in her lap under a moonlit sky, sometimes a dark sky, I used to look up and wonder about the vastness before me, the countless stars it held, some twinkling more than the others. The questions would come flooding back. Who made the universe? Why was I here and not on one of the other planets? Did people live on other planets too? Did God live on one of those distant stars? Where was God? Minute by minute, the hours would pass and my wheezing would finally subside by the morning. Only then would I manage to fall asleep. My father would pick me up and carry me back to my bed. Often, inhaling the air outside wouldn't work and he would rush with me to the hospital. I didn't mind going because spending a night at the hospital meant getting a day off from school. I would stay back at home and catch up on my reading or meditate. An injection in the hospital was a small price to pay for these delights. I had learnt the basic Vedic chants from my astrology teacher, but he only specialized in astrology and didn't have the phonetic precision required in Vedic chanting. I felt it was essential to chant the Vedic hymns in the correct manner in order to continue my exploration and experimentation. It was not enough to just sit still and chant Om. I turned to my mother again, who knew a young but scholarly Brahmin called Pandit Surya Prakash Sharma. He had recently moved to our town. Over the next few weeks, Panditji taught me the correct and rhythmic pronunciation of the core hymns from the Yajurveda, one of the 4 Vedas. Verses from the Yajurveda are used in the invocation of various forms of divine energies. Sanskrit, the language in which the Vedas are written, has the ability to take the mind into a trance-like state. This is chiefly because of the use of rhyme, rhythm and nasal sound across various meters. So Panditji agreed to teach me Vedic chanting. My work with him, however, didn't last very long. Occasionally, people visited him for horoscope readings. Astrology was not his forte, although his scholarly excellence in Vedic literature would have anyone believe that he was an expert in astrology too, for astrology was a Vedanga, Vedic branch after all. One day, a man came to have his daughter's horoscope matched. He had identified a suitable groom for her and wanted to ensure that the horoscopes of the two were compatible. Panditji calculated incorrectly and concluded that it was a flawless match. The maximum possible points you can score during the matching of horoscopes is 36. Panditji's total came to 43. He told the man that 43 meant it was far better than the accepted 36. I was alarmed. Though just 12 years old at this time, I corrected my teacher and informed him that this match yielded only 12 points with 2 doshas faults. It was actually a terrible match. The man was furious with me and shut me up, saying that Panditji was absolutely right and that such an excellent match was indeed possible because his own horoscope tallied at 33 points with his wife. He was happy to believe Panditji's incorrect interpretation since it gave him comfort and the permission to go ahead with solemnizing the alliance, something he so wished. This is what happens with most people. They are not in search of truth. They don't want to know the truth. In fact, they are scared of the truth. They have an idea or belief that brings them solace, and they merely want someone to validate it for them. They will run hither and thither until someone agrees with them. "I can't teach you," Panditji said after the man left. "Oh, what happened? I didn't realize he was upset with me." "Who are you to correct me? You think you are some great astrologer. I'm sorry, please forgive me, but if this man goes ahead and ties the nuptial knot based on the matching today, this marriage will be doomed. I was only trying to help." "I know, but you should not have corrected me in his presence. It was insulting and inappropriate." "I'm sorry, Panditji." "Don't argue with me, I won't teach you anymore. Go elsewhere." He added sarcastically, "You are a Brahmin, a learned astrologer. You don't need a teacher." I touched his feet and walked out of his life. We had both hurt each other. I had hurt his ego and he had hurt my dream. I decided I didn't need hymns and astrology. I would go my own way. Over the next few months, I studied major texts on yoga, tantra and mantras for guidance and concentrated on my meditation. My sadhana yielded some results in the form of an even sharper intuition, better memory and some visions and hallucinations, but these gains were nowhere near what esoteric literature promised. Treatises on mantra science made remarkable, even unreal claims. From flying in the air to the physical manifestation of objects, these books said all was possible. It's not that I was particularly interested in these powers, but they were like milestones on the path. When you passed them, you knew you were headed in the right direction. This time around, I couldn't find anyone to help me, no saint, teacher, priest or astrologer. I even started to think there was little or no truth to these texts on mantra science, until one day when a dream woke me up to another reality. A sadhu, tall, bearded and robed in black, appeared in the dream. "Keep going, son," he said. "Is there any truth to mantras? Spiritual practice and doubt are like light and darkness. They don't go together. Have faith. I'm not getting any results. Continue with patience and discipline. I've got no one to guide me. I'll visit you before midday today. Please, I want to ask you some questions now." But the sadhu disappeared. I woke up calm and restless all at once. I could not ignore this dream. It was so real and vivid. I ran to my mother, who was already up and about, although it was still dark outside. She had lit the morning lamp at the altar and was offering prayers to the deities. "I don't think I should go to the school today," I interrupted her. "You're up early. Oh, you've come here without taking a bath." Ignoring what she said, I sat down next to her. "I had a dream and I think I should stay at home today." "Why? Don't be scared." "I'm not scared. I saw a sadhu Baba in a dream. He said he would visit me today." "You must go to school, Amit. Besides, dreams are not real." "What are you saying? When I had the dream of Lord Shiva, you said it was real. You said dreams were real." "I'm sitting at the altar, Mummy. You know I won't lie to you. It was a real dream. I must stay at home because he said he would come today. I promise I'll study during the day." "What will I tell your father?" "Please, please, tell him anything. He'll believe you." "See, you asked me the other day why I lie. This is why I have to lie sometimes." We negotiated with each other. Finally, she allowed me to take the day off. Somehow, she managed to convince my father. Later that morning, I was alone at home. At around 1:00 a.m., someone knocked at the door. I rushed open it. Standing before me was a sadhu in black robes, matted locks tied at the back of his head and a beard that reached his chest. I offered him alms, but he said he had only come to see me. He didn't mention anything about my dream, though. He put his hand into his jhola and pulled out something. Handing it to me, he told me it was a CR Singhai. A CR Singhai is a little lump that grows on a jackal's body. After it becomes the size of a beetle nut, it sheds on its own. There are many tantric applications of a Singhai, provided a good tantric knows how to consecrate it well. It is used to fulfill material goals, cure diseases and hypnotize or mesmerize people. It can also be used in black magic to inflict harm or injury. If you put a genuine Singhai in vermilion powder, the hair on it continues to grow steadily, and you have to add to the vermilion powder every few weeks to keep it effective. Even though it is a dead lump, it consumes the powder. This object is Amogha foolproof. "I've come to give it to you," he said, and briefly explained how I was to use it. Then I asked, "Why am I not getting any siddhi?" "Because you are not focusing on the ultimate goal, but hankering after petty attainments. If you get hold of the sun, you'll get light automatically." He reiterated the instructions for the use of the Singhai and prepared to leave. I wanted to ask him so many questions, but his overwhelming and charismatic presence left me speechless. All I could do was prostrate in reverence. He blessed me and went his way. There was a lady who used to come to our house daily to do the household chores. She was more like a family member and we called her Massie. My mother did treat her like a loved one. That was an incredible quality about my mother. She was always giving. I never saw her express any hatred, jealousy or anger. She never shouted at us or even raised her voice. Massie had 2 sons. The elder one was 7 years old and had been suffering from leprosy since birth. I decided to use the Singhai on the child. Over the next week, I prepared the Singhai for application by consecrating it with a mantra, vermilion powder and black mustard seeds in the manner I had been told. On a certain Sunday, I gave Massie the sacred object, explaining that she should make an opening in her son's pillow and then insert it. After that, the opening had to be sewn up. "Leave it in for 40 days and make sure that no one else knows about it, not even your husband," I said. Her son began a miraculous recovery within the first week and was completely cured of his leprosy by the 3rd week. The sadhu had told me I was allowed to use this Singhai only once, and then it was to be immersed in a river or stream. At the end of the prescribed period, I asked Massie to return it to me. She went home and opened up the pillow, but there was no Singhai to be found. There could be 4 explanations for this. 1, she took it out but didn't tell me. This was hard to believe as she would not put her son in danger by distorting a tantric talisman. 2, someone else had removed it. 3, it had fallen out. These 2 options were unlikely because no one else knew about the Singhai and it had been carefully sewn into the stuffing of the pillow. 4, it disappeared on its own. I never figured out where it went, but it doesn't matter. The fact remains that the boy was cured in a matter of a few days when all other treatments had failed for years. His condition didn't recur. This encounter with the holy man created more questions than answers. Who was the sadhu? How did he manifest in my dream? Why did he choose me for the Singhai? How had he attained knowledge of the occult? Despite the questions, I was awestruck at the experience I had had, and the sadhu had appeared at a time when I really needed divine intervention to give me hope and show me the way forward. This incident served to renew my faith in God. I began to diligently practice the tantric method in my sadhana. Whenever I heard there was a saint or tantric in town, I made it a point to visit him or her. At first they wouldn't take me seriously because I was just a child, but as I sat there and spoke about my own sadhana, my understanding of astrology, the Vedas and other literature, the look in their eyes would change. They would then give me a proper audience, sharing their own experiences and giving me tips on what I could do differently. However, most of them had no clue about the actual practice or challenges of sadhana. Their knowledge was purely bookish. The genuine sadhaks were in a minority, 1 in 100, but they gave me enough fuel to keep my fire going. I slipped away at every opportunity to meditate in isolated places, did many yajnas, fire offerings, chanted various mantras and performed sadhanas of yakshinis, yoginis, apsaras and devis, who were all different forms of the tantric feminine energy. But there were virtually no results. No God or celestial being appeared. I began creating my own spiritual practice, borrowing rituals from various sadhanas, and using different ingredients and mantras in a way I thought would work for me. During the month of Kartik, from mid-October to mid-November, I visited a deserted area where a flower called the Mandara Pushpa grew. I would pluck 108 flowers, come home, make a garland of the flowers and chant over it. Then I'd put it in the fridge. The following morning I would a yajna and then go to the Shiva temple to offer the garland to the Shivalingam. This tantric sadhana was supposed to bestow the practitioner with a vision of Shiva. I followed this practice annually for 3 years from the age of 12, but there were no tangible results. The frustrating part was that I didn't know where I was going wrong, and there was no one to show me the path. My family members certainly couldn't help me. In fact, they didn't even know what I was up to. They had no idea of the parallel existence of my mystical world or of my deep interest in the occult. They often thought I was in the library when I was actually busy conducting a shastrartha, scriptural colloquy, with some saint or discussing my sadhana with a tantric. My mother knew of my inclinations, but was unaware of the details. Her unconditional support of my quest was a great blessing for me, though. My frustration began to give way to despair. If God existed, why didn't he appear before me? If the scriptures were right, if Tantra had any substance, why wasn't I getting the desired outcome? Where was I failing? Though powerful dreams and visions continued and even guided me along my path, I wasn't convinced. I wanted a physical manifestation, real proof that could stand my test of truth. Gradually, it dawned upon me that I had embarked on a lonely and difficult journey towards self-realization. It would require great tenacity, discipline, and time if I wanted to succeed. No matter what spiritual practice I followed, how I did it or how long I did it, there were no guarantees for me. Moving from ephemeral pleasures to a state of constant joy, rising from worldly emotions, and being able to live in a state of eternal bliss was going to be a very personal affair. I was my best friend and worst enemy on this journey. I had to create my own way, for the weeds of time had long covered the divine path trod by the ancient sages. Stocks and God, the more time I spent in sadhana, the more critical I became of astrology. While astrology merely focused on the 12 signs of the zodiac and the 9 planets, my sadhana exposed me to the existence of a vast and infinite inner world. I was beginning to see how I, and everyone around me, was an exact replica of the universe. If there were numerous stars in the universe, the macrocosm, there were countless cells in my body, the microcosm. If there were a sun and moon beyond, there was a solar and lunar channel of breathing within. If there was 70% water on the earth, there was also 70% water in my body. When innumerable planets, which twinkled like the mysterious stars, were visible even to the naked eye, how was I to believe that only 9 planets were affecting everyone's lives? And even with these 9 planets that astrology considered, I found it odd that Earth was not included. 2 planets, Rahu and Ketu, didn't even exist in the solar system, and the moon had the status of a planet when it was really just a satellite. I couldn't come to terms with the notion that Mars, which was millions of miles away, had the ability to influence my life, while the very planet that sustained me where I lived had no place in the astrological chart. I felt it was silly to spend time figuring out what the planets had in store for me rather than focusing on my own actions and their consequences. Instead of creating my own destiny, I was looking up to inanimate revolving balls in the universe to steer me. Nevertheless, I continued to practice astrology because my income from the readings paid for my books and other expenses. However, I stopped recommending stones and amulets for people to wear, for I no longer believed in these remedies. I tried to tell people that they ought to take control of their lives, and it was fine to be guided by astrological charts, but it was not prudent to live by its predictions. Yet they wanted to hear that the planets were the cause of their problems, not their own choices. My view was simple: if you keep doing what you've been doing, you'll keep getting what you've been getting. It is human nature to think that we are merely the subjects, and that someone else, perhaps God, is calling the shots. It is convenient to believe that we are being punished or rewarded by divine forces. The truth is that our future is determined by the choices we make today, and today is resting on the choices we made yesterday. Most of my clients thought astrological remedies would give them respite from their struggles. They believed that a talisman would manage somehow to change negative circumstances into positive ones, even if they continued to make poor or harmful choices. People wanted to believe that planetary remedies would sort out their issues, and a change in their mindset was not required. I saw that people were not ready to hear my truth. I felt exactly like Nietzsche, who once said, "They don't understand me, I'm not the mouth for these ears." I didn't want lifeless charts and distant planets to dictate the course of my life, intrude into my plans and karma. I was determined to script my own future. With my horoscope in one hand and a matchbox in the other, I went to the terrace one day. My brother followed me. Sensing what I was up to, he rushed downstairs to tell our mother that I was turning my horoscope into ashes. Meanwhile, I set the paper on fire. She came up running and rescued the half-burnt horoscope from my hands. "You shouldn't burn a horoscope, Amit. It must be protected. It is an object of reverence." "Ma, there's nothing sacred about a horoscope. I can't revere a piece of paper. A very learned Brahmin had written it when you were born." "That doesn't mean anything. Do you really think a horoscope has my destiny already written? Even Rama's horoscope was matched with Sita's. In fact, it was matched by the great sage Vashistha himself, but what happened? He was sent to exile and later he even abandoned Sita. Why? I don't have answers to your questions, Amit. What I do know is that just because we don't have the answer to something, it doesn't mean it's false or Meaningless, I'm not stopping you from believing what you want, but I can't let you burn this horoscope. Ah, don't be upset. I threw my arms around her and kissed her cheeks several times in quick succession. I can write my own horoscope whenever I want. You are very naughty and strong-willed, she said. It doesn't hurt to listen to your elders sometimes, you know. I must go now, I was in the middle of boiling milk. I'll get a new horoscope made and won't give it to you, she added on her way down. Don't waste your money, Ma, I said, laughing. Nevertheless, I was confused again. What if my mother was right? What if there was truth to all this and I was the one who couldn't see it? It was true that not everything my horoscope said materialized, but what about the parts where it was completely accurate, where it unerringly predicted many events of my life? I thought hard for a while, weighing the entire matter carefully, examining all aspects of astrology. Finally, I made a clear and firm decision. Astrology wasn't going to be a consideration in my life choices. I had to go beyond astrology because it mostly dealt with the outcome, not the journey. It could predict from a chart whether a person would be a saint or a sinner, but it was quiet on how one could go about it. It could show a moment but not the movement leading up to it. My horoscope said that I would achieve self-realization, but it couldn't tell me how. As I began to move away from astrology, I started focusing more and more on my meditation. At every opportunity, even while riding my bike or bathing, I would build my concentration on the sonic energy in the mantras. But I didn't see God, go into a trance or attain any special powers like the books were saying. Somewhere, I knew I was missing a key element. According to the sacred books, only a guru can guide the disciple and expound on the esoteric aspects of sadhana. While I understood that my journey of self-realization was my responsibility, I realized I needed a guru to help me unravel the mysteries of sadhana. It wasn't going to be easy to find success on my own. But where to go looking for a guru? I could not think of anyone better than my mother's eldest brother, R.K. Module. He was her idol and her ideal. Although he worked as a superintendent in the Indian Railways, this was not his speciality. He was actually an ardent Shiva devotee, and from the age of 13 till his last breath, he visited the cremation ground twice a day and lit a butter lamp. No one knew what sadhana he did there because he never disclosed it. Like everyone else, all I knew was that he lit a butter lamp. Dogs, birds, cows and other animals followed him there on a daily basis. My uncle led a simple and truthful life, and that is what always inspired me. It was so easy to talk to him. There was no pretense or hyperbole, just plain truth that would pierce my heart. I hoped that if he initiated me, I might start to get some results from my mantra sadhana, but whenever I asked him, he gently dodged my request. I was not surprised. After all, there was no comparison between the two of us. He, in his 50s, had put in more hours of sadhana than I, at 15, had lived altogether. One day we happened to be at his place. He had just returned from his morning visit to the cremation ground. "Come with me," he said. I followed him and he took me up to the terrace. I noticed he was holding a tiny, round box in his hands. When he opened it, it turned out to be empty but for a little ash. He pressed his thumb into the ash and then rubbed it against my forehead. "This is 40 years of my tapas," he said. I looked at him in wide-eyed surprise. "I've been consecrating this ash with the same mantra every day for 40 years, he added, "and you are the first and the last to have it." I knelt down in the greatest reverence, for he just initiated me. What mantra should I chant? "You will be traveling all over the world, and I don't want to tie you down by giving you a mantra that you must chant every day. Be free. Go live your dream. No power in the 3 worlds can stop you." He gave me 3 instructions, principles of life, if you will. Any instruction from a guru to a disciple must remain between them. Only when the disciple becomes someone's guru and wishes to pass on that message are the words uttered again. That day he brought his horoscope to me. "I have just one question," he said. I knew his question wasn't going to be an easy one. "What is the date of my death?" I was a little shaken. "Mamaji, I can calculate it, but my astrologer's code of conduct prohibits me from disclosing such information. I already know my date, I just want to confirm it." I couldn't refuse him. His word was my command. We agreed that he would write down the date he knew and I would do the same on another piece of paper. Then he would give me his slip and I would give him mine. I was curious to find out if he truly knew the date. Mine was a matter of calculation, although deep and intense, but his would be a matter of intuition. Could intuition match the precision of calculation? I took out my notepad and started my calculations based on his horoscope. After an hour, we exchanged slips. When I read the date he had written, I knew right away that hiding behind his ordinary appearance was an extraordinary consciousness. He had completely mastered his intuitive faculties. Obviously, I never forgot the date, and neither did he. Several years later, I would call him from Australia one day before his date of departure from this world. He was in hospital to undergo a minor surgery. Fit and healthy, he had even played basketball before going into the hospital. We were both sentimental over the phone. "Do you think I will come out of the operation theatre?" he asked. "Yes, why not? Not only that, you will play basketball again." I was happy to lie, and I was happy to believe in that lie. At that moment, how dearly I wished for my own prediction and his intuition to go wrong. Mamaji's doctor declared the operation a success and admitted him into the ICU so he could recover. He did not come out of it alive. I was nearly 14 when a scholarly figure, Prof. A.P. Sharma, entered my life. A PhD in English literature, he had known my father from his college days and had recently moved back to our town after his retirement. An excellent palmist, he read my palm and I his horoscope the very first day we met. We both made predictions about each other and laughed. When two tradesmen of the same trade meet, there is little they can do to impress each other, but in my case, I loved Prof. Sharma from the outset. Cultured and soft-spoken, he was full of warmth. He lived alone in his old paternal house. Other than the hundreds of books that took up most of the space in the house, his only other possessions were some bookcases, a bed, a sofa, an almirah and a study table. He had piles and piles of notebooks too, full of literary criticism and his musings on life. He adored his books and never left home without locking the bookcases. I would visit him several times a week and thoroughly enjoyed his company. He would work with me to improve my English language skills. English literature was his passion, and he would quote Austen, Chaucer, Shakespeare, Keats, Frost, Whitman, Dickens, Hemingway, Wordsworth, Wilder and others without ever opening a book. He often highlighted passages in his books and scribbled his thoughts along the margins of the pages. Writing in books was something I never appreciated. My philosophy was simple: books were for reading and notebooks were for writing. To me, books were an immaculate work of art, and marking in books was like drawing graffiti on a Picasso. You don't spoil what you love. That said, his love for English literature and language was infinitely more than I could ever imagine. For me, language was a functional tool, a craft even to convey what I had in my mind. For him, it was not just a medium of communication, but an art through which he created a whole new world. When you write, I want the writing to be so taught that if anyone is to remove even a comma from your sentence, the entire paragraph will have to be rewritten. When you speak, I want you to struggle, not because you cannot think of words with which to express yourself, but because so many rush to your mind that you have to really choose to pick the word that is most apt. That is perfect, he said more than once. One of our favourite pastimes was to sit in the soft winter sun and read classics. I would read and he would peel oranges, carefully removing the pith, putting the pips into a bowl and giving me the juicy segments to eat. During those hours spent in the sunshine, he often read my palm and made remarkably accurate predictions. We also talked a great deal about other things. There were no restraints or rules in our conversations, and my age was not a bar. "Why don't you tell me about your girlfriends?" he asked once. "Girlfriends? I don't have any." "I don't believe you." "I'm telling you the truth, uncle." "How can this be? You are young and expressive. You get good grades and the whole school knows you because of your astrology. Some girl must have a crush on you, or you must be attracted to someone." "But it's true, I don't have anyone." I felt rather shy having this conversation with him. The religious texts say that until one is 25 years old, one should be a brahmachari. This is old school. You must live your life, you must enjoy it. All our sages had consorts. No, I think the ancient books have some truth to them. Besides, who has the time for a girlfriend? When will I do my reading, play chess, practice astrology, or play the keyboard if I start devoting time to a girlfriend? "Oh, you are so uptight, Amit. Why are you so rigid? Loosen up a bit. How will I spend time with you if I have a girlfriend? You are all head and no heart. Never mind, one day you'll fall head over heels for some girl and won't be able to live without her." "That will never happen, I know myself. I won't marry." Your palm says it loud and clear. The line of marriage is pink, unbroken and strong. You will be married before you turn 28. "I don't think so." "What is wrong with you? You scare me with your ascetical and religious bent. You are all head and no heart." This became his standard line. This was how many conversations would end when he was unable to discern an emotional side to me. The truth was that in spite of my trying, I couldn't feel any attachment. I did not miss anything or anyone, not even Prof. Sharma. I tried mixing with friends with other people, but I found little joy in these associations. I wasn't doing this deliberately, this was just the way I was. On this particular occasion, when he spoke about my marriage with such conviction, I did wonder if he was right about my life. It was true that both my palm and my horoscope predicted marriage. Was I really in control of some preordained destiny? I thought about this for a while, and then decided I wasn't going to let a certain line on my palm dictate my future for me. I was determined to write the script of my own life. Engrossed in my thoughts and a little agitated, I left Prof. Sharma's house without saying goodbye. When I reached home, I found my mother sitting by the altar reading a sacred text as usual. That evening she was studying the Bhagavata Purana, the epic narrating the glories of Lord Krishna. Rather than giving her the usual peck, I just sat down near her. "You know, Mum," I said, "I can be whatever you want me to be, a high-ranking official, businessman or professor. I only have one request. Please do not force me or expect me to get married. I want to give my life to a spiritual cause. No one believes me when I tell them I will not get married." She could have easily brushed off my thoughts, dismissing my request as a teenager's idealism. Instead, she said, "I believe you. You are free to lead your life the way you please. I will never bind you to something you don't like, Amit. We can revisit this when you grow a bit older, though. Who knows, you may have a change of heart. Why don't you want to marry anyway?" I replied, "I have seen more than 3,000 horoscopes. Everyone has similar problems. What are they doing? They are born, they go to school and college, get a job, get married, have kids, go through the grind, become old and die." After hearing the problems of married people, I can categorize them into two types. The first involves people who are unable to make their marriage work. Though they have been married for quite a while, each day is a drag and they part ways eventually. Then you have the ones who are trying hard to make it work. Even for them, most days are tiring, but in between disagreements and confrontations, between the arguments and bickering, they also have good moments. All in all, it's too much work. Most people get married because they feel the need to do so, but I don't. More importantly, marriage plays no role in my path. Instead, I wish to do penance in the woods like the legendary Dhruva, like our sages of ancient times. I want to see if God really exists. "If," she said in surprise, "why do you do various sadhanas now if you still doubt God's existence?" "I do sadhana because I want to see him, Ma. I want to meet my Creator. I believe he exists, but how can I be sure until I see him? I doubt his existence sometimes because if he really exists, why is there suffering and misery in the world? If there's one God, why are there so many religions? Why did he allow it? Faith, child, faith erases all questions." I wish faith does not erase questions, it only ignores or discourages them. I know I can't win this debate with you, I just know that God is real. He protects, provides, and is watching over us. I wanted to continue, but there was a knock on the front door. It was Prof. Sharma. He had come to check on me, thinking he had upset me. I was only too happy to see him again. He had brought mangoes as a peace offering. For reasons I never quite understood, he loved me deeply. He had 2 photos of me in his wallet. Each time I got a passport picture clicked, he insisted on having one. The latest photo would go in his wallet and he would use the older one as a bookmark. He would make tea for me and serve it in an exquisite bone china cup and saucer that he wouldn't allow anyone else to touch. I had nothing to offer him, yet every gesture of his was full of care and love for me. "I'm at the twilight of my life, Amit," he would often say after a drink. "I won't be there to see you grow and conquer the world or partake of your success. I wish I had not been born so early." His eyes would well up. "But can you promise me something?" "Yes, uncle, anything for you." "When I die, I would just like you to be by my side. I would like to hold your hand in mine and breathe my last." I assured him I would be there for him without knowing if it would happen that way. It didn't. I gave him that reassurance because he was looking for it, but thinking about his death, I didn't feel any pain of separation. Maybe he was right after all. I was all reason and he was all feeling. Once there were floods in our region. From the roof you could see animals, furniture, utensils and many other unidentifiable objects floating down the streets. When the flood waters ebbed after some days and we entered our house, the most terrible thing was to see my books dead. They were swollen exactly like corpses and lay soiled and defaced. I put them in the sunlight, hopping to dry them, but the pages just curled in the heat. And they stank. Left with the memory of what they had been, I couldn't bear looking at them anymore. I didn't want to sell them to the scrap dealer, for you don't sell love. On a sunny day devoid of wind, I took them to the terrace and cremated them, all of them. Then I picked myself up and moved on. Meanwhile, my parents decided to build a room on the first floor of the house, so that we would have shelter should such a situation arise again in the future. The vendor who supplied us the building material was a man in his mid-30s called Parvesh Singla. The first time I visited his shop, we had a casual conversation and connected immediately. After that, we began meeting frequently. Like Prof. Sharma, he cared about me deeply. Once again, I could not quite comprehend why. I was unable to understand why a successful businessman like him hung out with a teenager like me. I asked, "Why do you spend so much of your time with me? You buy books and pens for me, you take me out for dinners. Why?" "I don't know what draws me to you, but you have this pull, Amit. You seem to have no confusion of any sort, and I always wanted a brother like you." I sat there thinking he was being sentimental like Prof. Sharma. I also felt guilty because I didn't feel any attachment for him. For me, he was a good human being I cared about, and we had common interests. We discussed philosophical issues and shared business ideas with each other. Astute at creating wealth, Parvesh had built multiple sources of income for himself. On one occasion he said, "I earn from my businesses, but I grow my wealth through stocks." "Wow, will you teach me how to invest in stocks? I have money left over from my astrological readings and would like to invest somewhere." "Yes, I'll teach you, but remember you can only gain if you are prepared to lose." He showed me how he picked stocks. He only invested in the primary market in IPOs, as he believed they were safer. Never love your stocks. Never forget that you buy them to make a profit. Once you have reached a profitable position, exit. If they betray you and you are making a loss, exit. Your goal is to make more profits than losses. I took a plunge in the financial world. I read voraciously, studying all the financial publications I could get my hands on. Over the next few months, I started buying stocks through sub-brokers. I also enjoyed and actively traded in the secondary markets. They were faster, riskier, more fun. 90% of my savings were now invested in shares. Stock trading was dangerous and exciting. I could lose all my savings or multiply them with little effort. Whenever stock prices shot up, I was delighted, and whenever they went down, I felt a sense of loss. I enjoyed riding this roller coaster of emotions. I passed Class 10 at the age of 15, scored 80%, and secured a place in the college of my choice. I chose to study commerce because, after my interest in the occult, it was business that fascinated me. I liked business because I liked challenge. On the one hand, I had seen the staid work routine of my parents, who went to work and came back at the same time every day. On the other, I saw Parvesh's exciting rise in the world of commerce. His thrilling account of the ups and downs of his business was more fascinating than Prof. Sharma reminiscing about his college days. It was just a matter of temperament, and given mine, I was more inclined towards the former. Seeing my passion for business, everyone around me thought I was obsessed about money. I did enjoy entrepreneurship and making money, and financial independence was certainly a good thing. Yet there was a deeper reason why I focused on business and continued with astrology, even though I'd understood it wasn't going to give me the answers I sought. By now, I knew without the shadow of a doubt that I wanted to give up the material world and walk the spiritual path. My hunger for God was stronger than anything else within me. Innumerable times, I'd thought of renouncing the world and going to the Himalayas to do austere penance. It was the soft eyes of my mother and her loving voice that always held me back. I didn't think she would be able to bear the separation. Worldly activities helped me curb my inner desire and pull on. I did not know how else to channelize my energies or distract myself. Whatever I tried my hand at, though, I mastered almost effortlessly. Soon it would cease to challenge me. Whether it was learning chess or playing a musical instrument, singing Vedic hymns or practicing astrology, each activity stopped stimulating me after a while. I wanted a task to really engage me, test me, surprise me, but everything felt so easy. Looking for something new, I decided to enroll in an advanced computer course at a private institution. At the end of the orientation on the first day, a young man wearing a turban and rather shabby clothes came up. To me, I actually thought he was a motor mechanic because there were small stains that looked like oil or grease smears on his clothes. Introducing himself as Harpreet Singh, he posed a question on the bag of Vegeta. I don't know why he asked me a religious question. I normally applied a tilak on my forehead but hadn't done so that day. I was dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, which is what I normally wore. He had no idea I practiced astrology or that I had studied many religious texts, yet he chose to ask me a question on the bag of Vegeta in a computer center. Anyhow, the question was not outside my field of knowledge. As I finished answering him, he suddenly asked, "Where did you learn English?" How weird, I thought. Rather than focusing on my answer, he only saw the language I used. Anyway, we chatted for a while. I told him I was doing that advanced computer course in order to build an application for the financial markets. Financial markets? Yeah, I trade in both the primary and secondary market, and I want to code an investment monitoring tool. Are you free for a few hours? He said. Now okay, but what do you do? Have you heard of Chardakala? Of course, Chardakala was a regional newspaper in the Punjabi language. I work there. Harpreet Singh took me to his office. He drove his scooter while I followed him on my moped. When we walked into the office, he took me into a cabin. The sign on the door said Chief Editor and Publisher. He turned on the air conditioning, picked up the phone and asked for someone. A man came in and my new friend ordered some tea. I was curious now. Who are you, and how come you are in the chief editor's cabin? He smiled. This is us, he said, pointing to a family picture on the desk. What do you mean? Harpreet Singh Dadi, that's my full name. My father owns this enterprise. Oh, really? Now tell me something, he said. Would you like to write for our newspaper? I've never written for any newspaper, and I don't write in Punjabi. LSO, what could I possibly write on? We launched an English-language financial publication last year called The Business Times, and it's doing well. I'm looking for a good columnist. And so it happened that I began writing a regular column for them with my stock picks. Pleased with my work, a few months later, they offered me the role of editor to run their weekly edition. I readily accepted. Soon I was spending most evenings at the press, writing editorials, selecting news items, and editing the work of other journalists gave me an intellectual kick. A couple of years later, I resigned and moved on to grow my part-time business of making computerized presentations for small businesses. My stint at the press came in handy while writing content. After finishing class 12, I stopped going to junior college and opted for distance education so I could better utilize my time. My college education had completely disappointed me, and I couldn't see what I had learned in the past 2 years. I thought of studying abroad, but affordability was a big issue. I didn't have any CR Singhai I could use to fulfill my ambition to go abroad, but I did have a mantra with me. It was said that chanting this mantra would send the practitioner on a voyage. Its sonic vibrations were supposed to manifest your desire, the law of attraction. I expressed my desire to the universe and started chanting the mantra in January 1998. While driving, bathing, eating, traveling, before sleeping, upon getting up day and night when I wasn't doing anything else, I meditated on the mantra with great mindfulness. I had faith in the mantra, but I wasn't sure if it would work quickly enough. My skepticism disappeared one day in March when one of my acquaintances casually mentioned her cousin, who was an education consultant and sent students to Australia. I asked my father, and he immediately approved of the idea of my higher education in Australia. I enrolled in a 2-year diploma in information technology at Hurstville Business College in Sydney. My father made withdrawals from his retirement fund to pay for the first year's college fee and my air ticket. I used my savings to do some shopping and buy Australian dollars. Meanwhile, I left behind my shares as a long-term investment. If I thought India was hard work for me, I didn't know what lay ahead in Australia. I had no tertiary degrees and no relevant work experience to help me settle down in a new country and be able to earn enough to support myself. I didn't even have full working rights since I could only work 20 hours per week on a student visa. What was to become of me? What chance did I really have? I just had the willingness to work hard, very hard. At 18, I was on my way to Australia. Chanting the mantra had manifested my desire, but I was responsible for living through the consequences. Alone but overconfident, unprepared but resolute, clueless but hopeful at heart, I was ready to face everything life would throw at me. First flight, I distinctly remember feeling numb on 2 occasions in my life. The first was when I was flying to Australia, and the second was 12 years later when I took renunciation. No, this was not a physical numbness but a sort of emotional paralysis. I remember not feeling any emotions. My family, along with a couple of family friends, came to see me off at the airport. Though they didn't say much, their eyes spoke volumes. I was going to a place thousands of miles away, without knowing when I would return. No one in the family had ever been on a plane before, let alone leave the country altogether. At the airport, they talked about everything else except my impending departure. This wasn't something they wanted to think about because, on the train of thoughts about my future, the only passengers were worries, insecurities, and the pain of separation. I remember saying goodbye as I passed through the security barrier. My loved ones stood watching me. I looked hopeful and helpless while they looked sad and helpless. The flight from New Delhi to Sydney was a little adventure for me. It was not like the first sighting of the bookshop when I was 5 or like my first trip to the library. Those were pleasant and joyful discoveries, and there had been no confusion at all. Here, I was doing things I'd never done before, like working out the mechanics of the seat belt and trying to understand what the paper bag was for. I didn't know if they charged for meals and drinks or what was stocked in the tiny restroom. Above all, I didn't know what awaited me in Australia. Thoughts of the future, nice and not so nice, continued to bubble in my mind. I wasn't anxious or nervous though. Internally, I was prepared to handle whatever came my way. I was simply quiet. This had always been my way. In the face of grave adversity, extreme joy, or an unfamiliar emotion, I would become quiet. The quietude allowed the emotion I was experiencing to sink in, and it allowed me to think. I held no conversations with my fellow passengers. I didn't watch any movies or listen to music. I simply sat there, dreaming and reflecting. I remembered how excited I had been when my agent, who had not only handled my college admission, but also my travel arrangements, had told me that my college would be arranging for a homestay. I would be living with an Australian family. This kind of accommodation would give me a chance to learn about Australian culture. I was also pleased to know that vegetarian food wouldn't be an issue for the family. "We've already sent the fax to the college administration and they'll arrange for someone," the agent told me. "They will hold a placard with your name on it at the airport," he said with conviction. Upon my arrival in Sydney, I went through immigration and baggage collection and then waited in the arrivals area. I was eager to see who was coming to pick me up and wondered what kind of family I would be staying with. I waited and waited, but no one turned up. I approached the crowd outside, scanning people's faces anxiously, expecting someone to step forward and ask if I was Amit Sharma. I peered at the signs they were holding, hoping my name might be on one of them. I went from one corner of the arrivals area to the other, thinking I may have come out of the wrong exit, but my efforts were in vain. I passed an hour moving around like a squirrel searching for walnuts in the rainy season. I was slightly nervous and restless, hopeful too. The faces of my loved ones flashed before me. They must have been wondering if I'd reached safely. I got change for $5 from a florist at the airport. Popping 2 $1 coins into a payphone, I made a brief call home to let them know I was safe and sound, and everything was fine. My family was relieved to hear my voice. I went back to waiting, which I did for another 3 hours. Anyone who could have turned up or intended to be here should have been here by now, I thought. Eventually, I concluded that no one was coming to get me. Later, the college administration would tell me that they were never given any intimation about an airport pickup or a homestay arrangement. Now I had nowhere to go. Other than the Australian flag, kangaroos and the Sydney Opera House, all of which I had seen on the TV and on the college brochure, I recognised nothing else in Australia. I knew no one. Here, actually, that wasn't entirely true. I did have a cousin here, but I wasn't in touch with him. A friend of a friend lived in Australia as well. I had a number for him, in fact 2 numbers. I tried them, but both turned out wrong numbers. For a moment I felt a sweat break out on my body. I scratched my head. Literally. Where was I to go now? Where could I find a place to stay, and where would I eat? I could go to a hotel, but with just over $3,000 being my entire lifeline, how long could I survive? Just then I remembered that my agent's son lived in Sydney, and he had given me his son's phone number. "You can call him if there's any emergency," he had said. Well, this was an emergency for me. I tried the number. Someone picked up the phone. It was the agent's son. I thanked my lucky stars. I briefly told him about the homestay fiasco and that I had nowhere to go. "My brother and sister have gone to India for the next 3 weeks, so I can accommodate you," he said. "Take a taxi and come over." He gave me his address. I hailed a taxi and got in. The taxi driver said, "Good day, mate." I had no clue what he said because it didn't sound like English to me. I'd never come across an Australian accent, not even in the Hollywood movies I had seen. Besides, I hadn't watched that many, maybe 20 in all, ranging from Baby's Day Out to the Terminator. I gave the address and we were on our way. My, how spick and span everything was. I never thought such cleanliness and organisation were even possible. Finally, we arrived at our destination, Falcon Street in North Sydney. I don't remember the house number. The weather was cold. I had arrived on 21 June. Fortunately, it was a Sunday. Had it been a weekday, the agent's son would not have been home and no one would have taken my call. Meanwhile, after paying for the cab and phone calls, I was down by $36. Nearly 1% of my savings was already gone. I dragged my heavy bags to the first floor. My host, a young man in his early 20s, introduced himself as Happy. He asked me to leave my bags in the living room. It was a one-bedroom apartment. "You can sleep on the sofa bed," he offered. I nodded. I was just glad to be somewhere with a roof over my head. Happy had another friend over for the weekend, a postgraduate in commerce. He was there on a student visa and worked in a factory. Soon 4 other guys joined us. They all worked in the same factory, and one of them had recently got his taxi driver's license. The postgraduate gave me some unsolicited advice as we were sitting around. "If you think you can get a job, forget it. I have an MCom from Delhi University, and I work in a factory here. There's too much racism in this country and Indian degrees or experience have no value. Local work experience is all that matters." "Can't he get a security guard's license?" another fellow asked. "The course costs around $1,200 if he can afford it, but even after that, he may or may not get any shifts, as you know," the Master of Commerce proclaimed like an oracle. "Yeah, perhaps he can get a job at a car wash, maybe. As a waiter at a restaurant. He wouldn't understand their accent. Can he work in a countryside farm?" "He can do that if he doesn't get anything else. It's not ideal because he won't be able to study that way. He can go to the farms if he doesn't pass his exams or if his visa runs out. I know someone who can offer him a job. He has a potato farm." This was Mr. Commerce again. "Taxi driver. You're kidding me. You have to memorize all the street names and routes. Do you know how difficult the test for the license is?" Till now, I had not participated in the discussion. This was going on between them quite independently of me. Ordinarily, I couldn't have cared about what they said or thought about me. I didn't have to prove myself to anybody, and certainly not to these people. However, looking at their zest and concern for me, I feared they might never stop this conversation. "Listen, folks," I interrupted. "I know exactly what I'm here to do, and it's not driving taxis, washing cars, or ripping potatoes. Before I run out of money, I'll have something more fitting arranged for me." I said some more things that I can't recall now, but I do remember speaking for about 5 minutes non-stop. They didn't bother me after that. Happy asked me to pay rent from the very first day I arrived. "The phone bill will be on actuals, the utilities on a pro rata basis," he added, "and I had to find my own accommodation within 3 weeks. Fair enough, but for now I was hungry, not having eaten anything since the morning. It was well past the lunch hour and no one mentioned lunch. Finally, at about 5 p.m. they got beer and other liquor and ordered food. They offered me some beer and even insisted that I tried whiskey. I refused. Drinking, smoking and partying weren't my style. Besides, I was unfamiliar with these guys. Prof. Sharma and Parvesh were the only 2 people I knew who drank alcohol. Parvesh drank rather rarely and Prof. Sharma drank extremely gracefully. All our pleasures live in the brain anyway. I had experienced far better, long-lasting stimulants for my gratification, and they were free of any damaging side effects. An intellectual challenge gave me the greatest thrill. For hours at a stretch, I could happily sit and solve a coding problem or stare at the chessboard, not to mention reading or creating music on my keyboard. Heck, I even got a hangover when a great book ended or I cracked a piece of code. Above all, there were the joys I knew within. I had experienced the pleasure of diving into the ocean of meditation. I had felt the rapture of chanting Vedic verses, where each escalating sound would transport me to another world. If there was adrenaline for the soul, if there was an intoxicant of the spirit, for me, it was meditation. The next morning I walked to the bank to start a new account. The bank manager was friendly and greeted me with a big smile. No one jumped the line. The place was well organized but relaxed. In less than 30 minutes I had a bank account number and a temporary ATM card. On my way back home, I picked up a free local newspaper. It was full of advertisements seeking administrative secretaries, assistants, telemarketers, and so on. There were no jobs for programmers, editors, or salespeople though. I found out later that only mainstream newspapers advertised the types of jobs I was searching for. In the afternoon, I went to my new college. It was just a few rooms occupying one floor in a small building. The principal, Richard da Silva, was a nice man. I introduced myself and requested him to help me find a job, but he said there was nothing he could do. I asked him if he could help me get work experience without pay, and he promised to try. Close to the flat, I found a business center where I could prepare, print, and fax my resume to companies. I applied for numerous secretarial and administrative jobs. After spending about an hour sending faxes, I rushed home to be close to the phone in case anyone called. I sat by the phone the entire day, but it didn't ring. Day 2, I sent out more faxes. Day 3, I learned that I had to make follow-up calls to the recruitment consultants at the various companies. They wouldn't call me. Day 4, I called home and let them know all was well. It turned out my mother had spoken to her elder brother, whose son, Aaron Module, lived in Sydney. He had suggested I contact my cousin, which I did. Aaron told me he would pick me up on the weekend, and I should pack my things for a couple of days with them. I was glad to be spending some time with Aaron and his family. Day 5, I saw not 1 but 2 letters in the mail. They had Logos printed on them. I was thrilled. Finally, I had got an interview call, or maybe even a straight job offer. The first letter turned out to be a polite rejection. It was so courteously worded that I thought they really loved me but couldn't hire me for some genuine reason. I opened the second letter. It sounded just like the first one. I was disappointed, but still appreciated the communication. Someone had cared to write that they didn't want me. Nevertheless, I called the numbers printed on the letters and was told that they would let me know if there were any future opportunities. Normally, in India, I would have shared my experience with someone in the family or with Prof. Sharma, but there was no one here to talk to. Suddenly, I felt a great vacuum. It dawned on me for the first time that I was in a totally new country, all alone. I had no backup and had to find a way to survive. I had to study in college, find work, foot my living expenses, as well as save enough to pay for my next year's tuition fees, failing which I could be deported. I went into the bathroom, the only place in Happy's apartment where I had any privacy. Looking into the mirror, I saw that I was crying. I didn't stop myself but let myself go. This was the first and the only time I cried in Australia. Afterwards, my eyes were red and swollen, and my face looked tired, but I felt fresh and light. Perhaps it had just sunk in that I was on my own here, and this acceptance had made me feel lighter. Anyhow, I couldn't afford to look scruffy because I was going to see Aaron in less than an hour's time and didn't want him to know I had been crying. I washed up and waited for him, my bag packed for the weekend. He called me from his phone as he approached my flat. I went down quickly. There he was, a handsome man standing beside a sleek Honda Legend. We shook hands and I touched his feet. I had met him only twice. Earlier, once as a child, and another time when he had visited India a few years ago. Sitting beside him as he drove, I was impressed by the car, its squeaky clean, plush leather interiors, automatic transmission and ample legroom. Aaron wasn't keen on students coming on a student visa and then struggling to live and study. He had expressed this some years ago when my mother had consulted him about sending my brother overseas for higher education. He held the opinion that it was better to study well in India and then work abroad if one wanted. It was the reason I had not informed him about my coming to Australia. "Now that you are here, let's make it work," he said after I filled him in on my situation. As we drove, I learnt that Aaron had recently quit his job and started a new business in shrink-wrap packaging. An engineer by profession and a genius by design, he would later grow his business into a multi-million-dollar enterprise, with operations in more than 10 countries. Aaron lived in Seven Hills, a suburb in the western part of Sydney, quite far from my college. It took us a while to reach his house. When we arrived, he introduced me to his little daughters, Ananta and Ayesha, who were 6 and 3 respectively. His wife, Anju, was a certified accountant and worked for a global investment bank. She was at work when I arrived. Later that evening she came home. Walking into the living room where Aaron and I sat chatting, she tilted her head to one side, gave me a broad smile and said, "Hello." Her warmth suddenly made things very easy. She turned out to be a bright and wonderful person full of love. Even though it had only been a week since I had left India, it felt like an eternity. Within this 1 week, I had reported at college, got my medical insurance and a new bank account, applied for at least 20 jobs, got 2 written rejections, scoured the streets of North Sydney, gone for a sales seminar thinking it was an interview call, been interviewed for the job of a chess tutor, applied for work experience at the college, and become comfortable with the Australian accent. I was also down by more than $200. On Saturday, Aaron and Anju had some friends over. Unlike the young men earlier, this was a sober crowd. We had an enjoyable dinner and I played a few songs on the Yamaha keyboard I'd brought from India, while everyone sat back and enjoyed the music. The next day it was time for me to go back. In the morning, Aaron came up to me and said, "We would like it if you stayed with us till you settled down a bit." "Would love it, Baya," I said, "but I don't want to be a burden. Is everyone else in the family okay with it?" "Yeah, I've discussed it with Anju. In fact, this is her idea." I was deeply touched at this gesture. Aaron kindly offered me the use of his phone line, which had a separate fax machine. As I sat down to send out job applications, my mind was flooded with business ideas. I saw opportunities everywhere. Not wanting to waste any time, I even registered a business name called Webcom Technologies. The internet was turning into a massive phenomenon, a juggernaut of possibilities, and I didn't want to miss the boat. The only limitation was that I had no capital to start anything. Having said that, I didn't require $1 million or even 10,000. I just needed someone to say, "Don't worry about the 5,000 for next year's college fees and don't worry about food and living for the next 6 months," and I would have thrown myself into building a business. However, I didn't have this kind of breathing space at the moment. I soon discovered that there weren't enough software job openings in the local newspapers, and no one was prepared to give me work because I had no local experience. To get in touch with more companies, I would pick up the yellow pages every day and call 50 potential employers. I would have even called 100, but Aaron had a quota of a certain number of free local calls from his landline, and I didn't want to exceed that. Once I called someone who heard me out and said, "I just felt I was listening to a robot." Robot, I had obviously failed. Here I was trying my hardest, and the fact that the person at the other end thought I was a robot could only mean I was sounding like a machine. What he said next corrected my view. "I don't have any IT requirements, mate," he said, "but would you like to come work for me? I need someone who sounds like you over the phone." This was the first compliment I had received from an Australian. I was still hopeful of finding a job in programming, so I politely refused. With every passing day, however, I was getting increasingly desperate. A week later, I got a telemarketing job offer and snapped it up. This company was based out of a suburb called Borkham Hills, and it was literally a home business. The employer had converted his house into an office. My remuneration was set at $12 an hour plus commission, and I couldn't resist calculating what I would do with that money. It felt like a lot of money all of a sudden. My job was to pitch our services to small businesses. Once the customer was interested, we would fax them an order form, and the deal was done if they signed and faxed back with their credit card details. My employer, an elderly man, had a specific process though. You had to make calls from 9 a.m. till 1 p.m., send faxes in the afternoon and follow up on the phone either in the evening or the next day. I did not break for lunch or tea. I just called and called. I found out that other telemarketers would manage to get 1 or 2 customers interested in the morning. On the very first day, I had over 8 such customers in the morning and 14 in the afternoon session because I made fresh sales calls all day. As soon as I had a customer interested, I ran to the fax machine, sent them a fax and made an immediate follow-up call so I could close the deal. The first day I bagged 6 customers. Wow, I thought. The boss had a different opinion. He did not appreciate my faxing at unscheduled hours. "You have to follow the process," he told me the next day. "We only send faxes during the lunch hour." I apologized and went back to making calls at my desk. I had nearly 30 keen customers but no deal closures on the second day. As far as I was concerned, you had to strike when the iron was hot. It was simple, a no-brainer. The third day, I sought the help of the operations manager, an older lady who reported to the boss. I explained to her that I could exceed all my targets provided I was allowed to send faxes right away. She took up my request with him while I waited outside his cabin. After a few minutes, he came out with her and said in my presence, "Tell this idiot to get out of here." I had never been spoken about in this way. I needed money, sure, but I wasn't prepared to be insulted. Like they say, there's always a first time. This was my first time, and I had been caught off guard. "What's your language, man?" I said. F***ku, he replied. I stood there stunned. The lady hastily asked me to leave as the old man could get quite mad. "Are you going to pay me wages and commission for 2 days or not?" I asked the lady. "Get the F***k outta here," he answered on her behalf. "What's wrong with you, man?" I said. Feeling helpless, I tried to match his pitch and authority but couldn't. I knew I sounded meek and insignificant, even to myself. He shook his head and went back in his cabin. The lady urged me to leave. I picked up my bag and walked out. Deeply stressed and lost in thought, I passed the bus stop without realizing and kept walking. Finally, I collapsed on the curb. For a long time, I just sat there thinking. My tuition fees of $5,000 were due in about 10 months, and I needed to move out of my cousin's house soon. I had to find a way to earn my living. Aaron was home when I got back. "You're back early," he said affectionately. The man swore at me. Who swore? The owner of the company. He swore at me. I divulged some details. "That's unusual, but why? What did you do then?" "What could I do? It's not like I had a choice, Baya. They asked me to leave." "That's awful, but don't worry. You'll find something else," he said. "Did they at least pay you for 2 days of work?" "They only paid in insults. No cash. I put my pride aside and asked them for my wages, but they refused." "Screw them. Come on, let's have a coffee." He tried to motivate me and make me laugh, but I was really dispirited. I didn't feel like doing anything at this point, but that wasn't a luxury I could afford. My survival depended on action. I picked up the yellow pages and began calling companies with even greater vigor. 6 weeks and 1,500 calls later, I got my first opportunity with a company called Australian Windows Publishing, AWP. A lady called Margot Plowright called me for an interview for unpaid work experience in software programming. I went to meet her the next day and found that she ran that business with her husband. Unpaid work was not the best offer, of course, as I desperately needed money, but an opportunity to work in the IT industry mattered more to me than a paid opportunity in any other industry. I asked them if I would get to code in C++, a programming language I knew really well, and they indicated I would. The programming language they used was Delphi, though, a language I'd never heard of. I wasn't really keen on working in it, because there was no growth or future as a Delphi coder. Still, getting any break right now was good enough for me. AWP offered me 4 weeks of work experience. The entire time I was simply copying and renaming HTML files. That was my job. Easy, very easy. I wasn't looking for an easy job, though. I had understood quite early in my life that the amount of money you made was directly proportional to the degree of difficulty you could handle. The more stress you could handle, the more money you were paid. Easy jobs paid less. Anyhow, I had no choice. At the beginning of the 4th week, the couple gave me amazing news. "We're very happy with your work. We would be pleased to offer you a 1-year contract. Starting next week, we'll pay you $15 an hour for 40 hours a week." I couldn't believe my ears. Finally, I had a job offer. Someone thought what I did had value. Money can make you feel important, and I felt important. I thanked them for their offer, though I wasn't entirely satisfied. One reason was that I wasn't coding. I was doing something that even a 6th grader could do. 2, I hadn't yet told my employers that I was allowed only 20 hours paid work per week as stipulated on my student visa. That evening, while I was attending classes at college, my principal called me into his office. "Congratulations, Amit, I've got some good news," he said. "We've lined up an interview for you with a software company." "Thank you so much, Richard. It's unpaid work experience for 2 weeks. If they like your work, they may extend it by another 2 weeks." "Awesome. Your interview is on Wednesday." On Wednesday, I called in sick at AWP. They didn't mind, I was doing free work after all. I went for my interview with Trading Technology Australia, TTA. This was a small financial software company based downtown. The directors of the company, Gregory Rostron and Joe Maisano, interviewed me. Greg was a Swiss-German who had moved to Australia a long time ago. Joe was of Italian descent but born and raised in Australia. After the interview, they offered me the position of a computer programmer. I double-checked that my work experience was going to be in programming and was assured it was. I asked if I would get to code in C++, and they said that C++ was what they generally used. Though I wasn't going to be paid for this work, I was offered a weekly railway pass. Now I was faced with a great dilemma. On the one hand, I had a full-time job offer from AWP and they were ready to pay me, but there was no growth or intellectual challenge. On the other hand, TTA was offering an unpaid opportunity for just 2 weeks with no guaranteed prospects, but the work was in programming, my area of focus and ambition. If I chose TTA, I could be back to square one in a couple of weeks, calling companies for work experience. With AWP, I could still be copying and pasting files a year later. What's the worst that can happen? I asked myself. I reported at the Trading Technology Australia office on Monday. After introducing me to the small team of developers, Joe gave me my first assignment and asked me to build a contact management software. A contact management software. I was a little surprised at this instruction because I thought I was going to work on their financial software. Yes, I need an application to manage my list of prospective and existing customers. He took me to a computer. We have VB loaded on this machine. VB. Yes, don't you know Visual Basic? I had made it clear in the interview that I only knew C++. I don't, but I can try and learn. That was that. I sat staring at the screen, not knowing what to do. My computer wasn't connected to the internet, which meant I couldn't access any reference material from the web to guide me. I knew that if I couldn't code the system, I would be shown the door at the end of 2 weeks, if not earlier. The easy job scene at AWP kept intruding into my thoughts, but I was here now and had to quickly find a solution. I was already down to my last $600. At lunchtime, I went out and bought a book on Visual Basic. 4 days later, I showed him the full version of my contact management software. "This is good, mate," Joe said. "How come you said you didn't know VB?" "I didn't really." "And you coded this entire software in 4 days?" "Well, yes." I'd heard Indians are great programmers. 4 days, amazing. "Thanks, Joe, I still need to make many improvements, it's the first version." "Go for it, mate." He looked at Greg, raised 4 fingers and said, 4 days. The following Thursday, they extended my work experience for 2 more weeks. By the 3rd week at TTA, Greg and Joe had gained enough confidence in me to assign me their flagship product called Ringer. Designed for the financial markets, Ringer was a highly complex and sophisticated piece of software that allowed bonds, forex and options traders to buy and sell based on market movements. Working with a small team of developers, my task was software maintenance. Towards the end of my month there, they offered me a permanent part-time job at $15 an hour, 20 hours a week as per my visa conditions. I wanted to work more than 20 hours though, but without violating my visa. I approached Greg and Joe. "It's fine if you pay me for only 20 hours, but I would really like to learn more. Can I work here for 40 hours a week or longer? I don't have my own computer at home as yet." "That's fine," Greg said. "We'll give you the office keys and you can leave late if you like." I had to work harder, learn quicker, and earn more because this was the only way I would ever be able to fulfill the dream I had of studying at university one day. I knew it was a wild dream, for it was beyond my range of affordability. My current worry was my college fee, because the next installment, $5, would be due in 7 months, and I had no clue how I was going to save that sum. I was already working as hard as I reasonably could. My day usually started at 5 a.m. so that I could take a bath before everyone else. This was to avoid disturbing them later, as there was only one bathroom in Aaron's house. Once I was ready, I would have a cup of tea with 2 slices of bread and pack my lunch. This generally consisted of food I had saved up from the night before, or another 4 slices of bread with jam. I used to leave home around 6 a.m. and walk 2 km to the station. It was a hilly area and would take me exactly 18 minutes of brisk walking to reach the train station. Occasionally, Anju gave me a lift to the station when she left early or I left late. It was a 45-minute ride to the city and a 15-minute walk before I reached the TTA office. I started work at 7:30 a.m. and coded till just after 5 p.m. From work, it was a 20-minute train ride to my college, where I would study till 9 p.m. By the time I got back home, it would be nearly 11 p.m. After entering the house quietly, since everyone was asleep at that time, I would freshen up and change. Sometimes, I wanted to step into the shower but eschewed it, as the sound could wake everyone up. There were times when I even avoided using the toilet at night because flushing was noisy. Anju would keep dinner for me. I usually heated the plate of food in the microwave. At other times I ate the food cold because turning on the microwave could be a loud affair at night. Anju and Aaron had hectic schedules and little kids, and I didn't want to disturb them. I wasn't going to repay their kindness with inconsideration. Once in a while, Anju and Aaron would be watching Law and Order on TV when I got back, and Anju would serve me a hot dinner. By the time I was finished with dinner, it would be nearly midnight. I would prepare the sofa bed and then study for 2 hours, after which I would sleep. Sometimes, Aaron would walk into the room while I was studying and, in the loving tones of an elder brother, ask me to get some sleep. There was no doubt that the couple loved me deeply. They didn't charge any rent from me or have me pay for groceries or utilities. I was always a part of their weekend outings, and they never intruded into my personal space. Aaron always encouraged me, and Anju always supported me. I had been staying at Aaron and Anju for nearly 5 months. I was earning now, and it was time to look for accommodation of my own. Shared accommodation was my only choice as I didn't make enough to afford an independent place. In the first week of December, I saw an advertisement in the local newspaper. It was from someone who lived near my college and was looking for a flatmate. He turned out to be an Australian man of Croatian descent. When I called him up, he introduced himself as Anthony. Then he said, "It will be $100 per week plus utilities on actual." I took the offer in a jiffy. Life was easier now that I was living a couple of blocks away from my college. Saving nearly 2 hours of commuting time every day, work was only a 20-minute train ride away. It gave me more time to study, read and sometimes to rest and dream. With a room to myself, I also resumed my meditation. Anthony and I didn't communicate much. Employed in the construction industry, he'd leave early in the morning and be back by mid-afternoon. I didn't know anything about the construction industry and he didn't know anything about computers. While I was a devout Hindu, he was a staunch Protestant. I was unfamiliar with Croatian culture and knew only a little about Australian culture, while Anthony had simply no idea about India. We did have one thing in common though: we were both the quiet type. And this was enough to strengthen our human bond because, through our silence, we accepted each other and respected each other's personal space. Unexpectedly, we became good friends when I helped him buy a second-hand computer. One lazy weekend, 2 months after I'd moved in, he started talking about some person called Elvis Presley. Apparently he was a rock star. Only I had never heard of him. "What, you've never heard of Elvis?" He didn't close his mouth after completing the question. "No. You are joking, no. Mate, you must be the first man on the planet who hasn't heard of Elvis." "Maybe." He threw his head back and cackled with laughter. Later that day, I happened to speak to my brother in India and told him about this little incident. "Ask him if he's heard of Lata Mangeshkar," he said. "Tell him she holds the Guinness World Record for singing the most number of songs, over 26,000. We both had a good laugh over the phone. No matter what, my brother Rajan supported me unconditionally. For survival in Australia, however, I needed funds more than I needed laughter and comfort. At work post-tax, I was making $254 per week. After the rent, utilities, train pass and groceries, I was left with roughly $50 but still partied once a week. Every Friday I treated myself. In the morning I bought a cappuccino, my favorite beverage. In the afternoon I had orange juice, and in the evening I went to Hungry Jack's, a fast food chain, for a veggie meal. It came with a delicious vegetarian burger, French fries and a soft drink. There were 3 people at my party, I, me and myself, never 4, never 2. There was no time, no thought of other friends, girlfriends or socializing. Every week I also treated myself to a new book. I had realized that even if I could save $50 per week, it wouldn't suffice to pay for my college fees. Investing in books and building my knowledge base seemed a better option than building my bank balance. Even though I never spoke about it, Greg could sense my concerns and the challenges that I was faced with. He once invited me to have lunch at his home with his wife and 2 boys. His wife, Linda, was a lovely lady and took the trouble to make lentils for me since she knew I was a vegetarian. Greg was kind to me and suggested I stay with them to save rent. I was touched at his generosity. Free accommodation would really help me save money. But I had always been a somewhat private person. I cherished my space in the quiet apartment I was in. Besides, a free stay was not the long-term solution anyway. I had to be making more money. I continued to train and enhance my skills and improve myself by constantly reading more books and learning new technologies. And I coded day and night. When I wasn't coding or studying, I meditated. You could wake me at midnight and ask me about the specs of a programming language. I would give you the correct answer. You could give me buggy software and I would look at it and point out precisely the error in it before even compiling and running it. It was almost like developing programming intuition. I couldn't afford a tutor. I had no mentor in programming and college teachers were too basic for my needs. I needed God to help me with my programming, but he was busy restoring chaos in a twisted world. I had to rely on my own skills and, of course, books. In my efforts to educate myself further, I decided to get Microsoft certification in systems engineering and bought a set of books to study for this certification program. Memoir, a recruitment company, allowed candidates to come and take the online test on their premises. The day I went there, I met two wonderful people, Kieran Hawthorne and David Su. Kieran was a Caucasian and looked every bit Australian, while David was of Chinese descent but born and raised in Australia. After we chatted for a while, Kieran surprised me by saying he wanted to interview me for potential job opportunities with his clients. We sat down in one of the meeting rooms to talk. "What other programming languages do you know?" he said. Instead of answering his question, I said, "Kieran, you'll leave Memoir real soon and start your own company." "Excuse me." "Yes, and I'll be the first candidate you'll place with a client." He quickly closed the door, sat down beside me and murmured, "How do you know? Are you psychic? I just started thinking about leaving last week." When my intuition talks, I listen. I listen to my inner voice, Kieran, and it tells me what I just told you. Will I do well in my business? Yes, I have no doubt. 4 weeks later, Kieran called me from his own recruitment firm. He said there was an opportunity for a web programmer with Pure Commerce, a startup based in the Australian Technology Park, ATP. The CEO was a 26-year-old called Daniel Leverkey. Kieran put me in touch with him. Daniel ended up interviewing me 3 times in 2 weeks and grilled me at every interview. During one of our conversations, I asked him how big the company was. Without giving me a direct answer, he told me that there were many stakeholders and contractors. After the interviews were done, I was told that someone would get back to me soon. It was a Thursday and I was at work at TTA when my phone rang. "Congratulations, you've got it," Kieran said. My heart skipped a beat. "I have." "Yep, 4000 package." Now we were talking. University seemed within reach. "When do I start?" "Daniel wants you to start ASAP, Monday, but I have to give 2 weeks' notice." "I strongly recommend that you start on Monday because we don't want to lose this opportunity. I have already talked about your visa situation, and Daniel says he will have the contract drawn out accordingly. I doubt we'll get a chance like this again." It was true, I didn't want to lose this chance. Pure Commerce specialized in building payment gateway systems, one of the first companies in Australia to do multi-currency payment processing online. Right after this call, I broke the news to Greg and Joe, telling them that I was leaving their company. Greg took me in the meeting room, closing the door a little harder than usual. "Tell me now," he said with a neutral expression. "What's the matter? I want to leave TTA. But I even offered you a free stay at my home." "I know, Greg, I'm sorry. I have to go because I need to pay for my uni education." After some more discussion, where he tried to convince me to stay on, we arrived at the subject of the notice period rather abruptly. "Well, you do some thinking and let us know on Monday." "Actually, I won't be coming to work on Monday." "What, you have to give us 2 weeks' notice?" "I'm sorry, Greg, I can't because the new employer wants me to start on Monday. Rest assured my code is fully documented." "This is insane." His voice was a little raised now. I sensed that he was more angry than sad. "I'm sorry." "You think it over properly, mate," Greg said tersely as we finished the meeting. This was April 1999, and I had worked at TTA for over 6 months. I left that afternoon and didn't go back the following Monday. The green bean that I was, I didn't value my relationship with Greg and Joe. What was even worse was that I knew this was not the way to quit, but was unable to resist the new job opportunity. I felt I couldn't afford to let it go as I needed the funds to pay for my education. Still, leaving as unprofessionally and ungratefully as I did was a mistake, a moral error. Professionally, I had done more than my fair share since I was only being paid for 20 hours whereas I had worked twice as many hours. Personally, I had thoroughly failed in repaying Greg's kindness. I owed both Greg and Joe an apology, something I never got around to doing. I started at Pure Commerce with great enthusiasm. Other than me, there was just one more person working there, Daniel. I searched for other employees, but there weren't any. I was his first and only employee, and it would remain like that till the last day of my employment there. It didn't bother me, though. I was being paid a good salary, the work was interesting, I had a personal phone on my desk and my computer had internet access. While I was working at Pure Commerce, I also managed to complete my 2-year college diploma, in fast-track mode in a year's time. But this diploma was merely a milestone and not my destination. After finishing the course I had struggled so hard for, I realized that I had actually not learned much in the past year. My work experience had been far more rewarding. If I could, I would have dropped out of this course, but that was not a possibility, for it would mean a violation of my student visa and subsequent deportation from Australia. My heart was set on a university education, and I wanted a proper degree, at least a bachelor's. At the same time, giving another 3 years to a bachelor's degree was not something I was prepared to do. I wanted to do it as fast as possible and get it out of the way so that I could focus on my career. Meanwhile, there was a small issue with my diploma. I had scored well and was qualified to receive the diploma, but it turned out that if I wanted to receive my certificate, I would have to pay the full fee for the second year too. This wasn't unreasonable, but I just didn't have the $5,000 to pay for it. Not losing hope, I took my transcript and went to meet the course coordinator at the University of Western Sydney. He looked at my application and then examined my transcript, resume and the sample printouts of my software coding, all of which were neatly pinned to the application form. "Why do you want to study at UWS?" he said. "Because it's one of the best universities here and offers just the course I want to do." "But you are already employed in the industry." "Yes, Mr. Hosey, but I want to learn more about software modeling and business systems." He interviewed me for about 15 minutes and subsequently marked on the application form, "Exempted from the first-year core subjects." "I've given you the maximum permissible exemption. Welcome to UWS," he said. Mr. Hosey also approved my request to pay the tuition fees in installments. My efforts at the business college weren't a waste after all. Not only did I save a year of my 3-year degree, I also saved $1,400 in just tuition fees. I moved out of Anthony's place and into my own flat in a suburb called Parramatta, as it was closer to the university. Suddenly, I felt there were no problems in my life. Everything had worked out. During my daily commute on the train, I started writing articles for publications so I could better utilize my time. These were largely technical journals and magazines based in the US. I was paid US $500 for every article. I stopped writing after a couple of months, however, due to the lack of time. You had to pitch the idea, write the article and supply sample code. None of this was hard, but it was time-consuming, and time was something I didn't have to spare. I began using my commuting time to do my university assignments instead. At Pure Commerce, pleased with my work and the revenue my applications were generating, Daniel gave me a $3,000 raise spread over 4 months. While this was highly motivating, I was no longer excited about the company. There were 2 primary reasons for this. First, being the only employee here, there was no sharing of knowledge with teammates, no one to bounce ideas off. My spirit of competition was suffering because there was no one to compete against. Secondly, I had already finished building the core software. It was the mango I had sucked dry, and there was no juice in it now. Maintenance of systems was hardly a challenge for me. I wanted to build because building was the real deal. A software developer working on system maintenance is like an architect who, after erecting a world-class building, switches to the work of a janitor in the same building. What next? I was itching to work on a larger and far more complex system, wanting to solve deeper and bigger problems. I rather enjoyed coding because it gave me an experience of complete absorption, almost like meditation. Just when I was contemplating moving from Pure Commerce, David Su from Manpower contacted me. It was as if the universe had been listening and said, "Granted." We met over a coffee, and as we chatted, he said, "Someone like you should be working for a large corporate." "But who will hire me?" I asked. "Why do you say that?" I opened up to David and shared with him the work restrictions on my visa. Any public limited company would never take that chance, no matter how skilled I was. David, however, had a different view. He told me about an opportunity with a large company who would go the extra mile for me. "But how will we resolve the visa issue?" I asked. Leave that to me. There's another problem, David. Without waiting for him to respond, I told him that in the upcoming semester at university, there were 2 subjects that were only offered on a certain weekday, which meant taking a day off every week. Don't worry, we'll work this out, really. Yep, he said, just don't mention any of this to the client in your interview, I'll handle it. 3 days later, I was called for an interview with News Interactive, a division of News Corporation, the media giant. After a series of interviews, David struck a hard deal. I've some good news for you, Amit, he said over the phone. Shoot, I was so excited. Nah, let's meet for dinner after work today. I went straight to Darling Harbour after work, and we sat down at our usual table in Saffron, a plush Indian restaurant. Guess what, David said in his usual matter-of-fact tone. I've got the package we were aiming for, along with visa sponsorship from News Corporation. Plus they'll give you a day off every week till you finish your degree and they'll pay for your uni. I was overwhelmed and my eyes became moist. And I kid you not, Amit, David continued, this is only the beginning. Your technical competence is intimidating. I did not want to sit on my laurels but do better. I wanted to pledge my loyalty to David. I wanted to make him and my employer proud that they made the right decision in choosing me, but I was reluctant to take the sponsorship from News Corp because it came with the condition that I would have to work for them for a minimum period of 4 years. I had never liked getting tied down. I told David about this. I'll get the contract amended, he said. For as long as you are in this business, David, and for as long as I'm in this industry, I said, I give you my word you will be my only agent. I held up my sparkling water while he raised his beer mug. Cheers, mate. Soon after joining News Corp, they appointed me a technical lead. I was going to lead an entire team of developers. Everything was bigger here, projects, teams, responsibilities and challenges as well as the rewards. The office itself was far grander than anything else I had encountered so far. Situated in a place called Piermont, the office was a waterfront property with floor-to-ceiling glass windows. There was even free coffee and a pool table. And no, this wasn't the distasteful instant coffee but the real thing. 2 baristas made the most wonderful café lattes, cappuccinos and espressos. We were in the throes of the internet boom and employers were trying everything to lure skilled IT professionals. It was a highly productive environment at News, especially suited for geeks like me. I kept delivering on my projects and they kept assigning me more. David and I became really good friends. We met at least once a week, if not more. A black belt in Taekwondo, he was kind-hearted and competent. He was a relationship builder. While I always focused on performance and delivery, David made me see that interpersonal relationships at the workplace played an even more critical role than performance. Technical excellence alone was not enough for professional growth. While at News, a former Pure Commerce client contacted me. They ran a highly profitable online casino out of Antigua and the Barbuda Islands. They wanted to meet me, and a meeting was scheduled with the founder and other executives at their head office in Antigua. The chairman, tall, slim and grey-haired, introduced himself as Otto. They offered me the role of technology director. It was a $75,000 package. This was not just a raise but a quantum leap from what I was making, far more than I could ever hope to make in Australia. In return, I had to build a payment gateway for them. I was ready to take up the position, except for a moral dilemma I found myself in. I wasn't sure I was okay working for a casino. The issue was resolved when I happened to meet a member of their customer service team while I was making a round of the office. He was replying to an email from an American customer who was begging for his transactions to be reversed because he had made a huge mistake. The American customer had gambled away $6,000 between his 4 credit cards. In his email, he wrote that he was going to lose his home. I asked the customer service person if anything could be done for this man. Don't worry, I get many emails like this on a daily basis, he said. Dismissing the man's plea. I had to think no further. I told them I had to go back to Sydney to wrap up things there and agreed to join them 4 weeks later. However, I had no intention of coming back. Till date, I don't know why I lied to them, but it was a strange environment there. I felt suffocated and wanted to leave as soon as possible. People were losing their lifetime savings and homes, and I didn't want to be a part of it. From Sydney, I spoke to the CEO and told him that my conscience didn't allow me to support a casino. News Corp, in the meanwhile, gave me a hefty pay rise of $2,500. They thought they had lost me. Over dinner one night, David said, "I think you're meant for a bigger role, Amit. They are underutilizing you at news." "You think so?" "Yes, you should be heading an organization and not just projects." This was David's style. No matter how important the information, he always delivered it casually. There was no way of knowing if it was a spontaneous remark or if he had given it serious thought beforehand. "Do you have something in mind? You should meet Greg," he said. "Who's Greg?" "He makes technology blueprints for large organizations and needs someone like you." That was all he said. 2 days later, he introduced me to Dr. Gregory Uppington. A PhD in enterprise integration and an IT veteran, Greg's humility was unearthly. Greg and I connected from the moment we first shook hands, and we went on to become close friends. He specialized in large-scale systems integration and was working as the Chief Information Officer, CIO, for a startup called Industry-Wide Networks, IWN. He mentioned they were really struggling and desperately needed a sharp Chief Technology Officer, CTO. Greg wanted me to take on that role. I met with the CEO, Daniel Hilson, or Dan as he was called. I loved his product and vision. They were using cutting-edge technologies and working on a data aggregation product way ahead of its time. After a series of interviews with Dan and his team, the company's board grilled me for 3 hours after offering me just a glass of water and before agreeing to my expectation of a $250,000 package. The executive team at News Corp was not pleased to see my resignation. They tried to hold me back with more money and argued that I had numerous options at News, but what they didn't have for me was the enormous challenge that IWN's product had. Apart from the product they were working on, I was really attracted to Dan's vision and entrepreneurial traits. Here was a young CEO in his early 30s running his own show. I could learn much from him, I thought. Within the first 3 days at IWN, I had studied their systems documentation, examined the software architecture and the system's design, glanced over the coding and identified the gaps. I came to a disturbing realization. The vision was great, but the product wasn't as complicated or complex as they had made it out to be. There was no way it could absorb 8 to 10 hours of my time daily. An hour each day would do the job. I could not justify receiving such high salary. I shared my findings with Dan and said, "I don't think you need me full-time, Dan." "How you mean?" "Well, I can guide the team and steer the product development by giving it just 1 hour daily. There's nothing for me for the remaining 7 hours. He seemed intrigued by my statement and shook his head slightly. Perhaps he thought I was going to resign. A few moments passed in that uncomfortable silence. "What do you suggest?" he asked finally. "I can build a consulting division for you. Let me bring in revenues so I may pay for my own salary." He nodded in appreciation. A few days after our conversation, he scheduled a meeting with the world's biggest shopping mall company, Westfield. It was perfect timing. They were running a multi-million-dollar e-commerce project, but were struggling with the delivery and integration. They gave us a 7-figure contract on the condition that I was going to be available to them full-time. I juggled between the 2 roles, leading the project at Westfield and handling the product team at IWN as their CTO. My employer continued to be IWN. I was pleased to generate revenue many times more than my salary. This was 2000. I had landed in Australia in 1998 and had struggled to find a job that would pay me anything at all. 2 years later, at 20, I was sitting on an executive technology management role with a more than decent salary package. Was this just due to my hard work? It would be foolish to think so. A transcendental element of grace was always there. Otherwise, there was no dearth of people who worked harder than I did and who were smarter than I was, but didn't find such success. In July that year, Rajan and my mother decided to visit me. They hadn't seen me in 2 years. I wanted to take my mother around and thought of buying a car. One weekend, David and I stopped by the Saab showroom. We stood around for 15 minutes, which felt like an eternity, hoping someone would come around to attend to us. Finally, a young man came over. "Hi guys," the salesman said, "how can I help?" When I asked for a test drive, he said there were no cars available. I was taken aback at his indifferent attitude. Was he not interested in making a sale? I handed out my business card. His body language changed instantly. He said brightly, "Should I see if there's a car for a test drive?" "Tell you what," I said, "come and see me in my office instead. Bring a demo car and the paperwork." What time would suit you, Mr. Sharma? He shifted his gaze from the business card to me. 11 a.m. Monday, I'll be there. On Monday, when I was test driving, he told me that he was the youngest in the dealership, and the seniors had sent him to attend to us because they didn't think we were there to buy. It was raining lightly. I felt this was symbolic of grace. Otherwise, how could someone who had winced at the thought of boarding a bus because the fare was $2 just 2 years ago now buy a convertible that was nearly $7,000? Grace. I wanted to spend that money for my mother. I loved her in a way I loved no one else. It was not possible to ever repay her for the sacrifices she had made for me, the countless nights she had stayed awake with me when I was suffering from asthma, and the way she had always stood by my side. It was not part of her job description to support my sadhana or my interest in astrology, chess, books and other things, but she had. I wanted her to have the best time in Sydney. I did up my flat, buying new furniture, bed linen and toiletries. I stocked the fridge and the kitchen with all kinds of food items and bought gleaming new pots and pans for her. Finally, I drove to the airport to pick them up in my new car. As soon as I saw my mother, I touched her feet, hugged her tight, kissed her cheeks. I hugged Rajan too. I was thrilled to see them. You've lost a lot of weight, she said. You must be working hard at the cost of your health. You've already started worrying, I exclaimed. Now that I'm here for 3 months, I'll feed you well. Tell me, Ma, do you like my new car? I pressed a button and the roof folded into the trunk. I bought it for you. May God bless you with much more, she said, and may you always. What about me, Amit? Rajan interjected jokingly. I think I'll have better use of this car than our mother here. Ma was rather quiet in the car while Rajan was excited and chatty. I talked about the socio-economic system in Australia, the clean roads, my studies, my company and everything else I could think of. For every one of my statements, Rajan had 10 questions. Later that night, I asked my mother what was on her mind. She said, I know you had told me about your successes here over the phone, but after seeing it all with my own eyes, I don't have enough words to thank God. I'm feeling so content. In response, I just put my head at her feet. It's all because of your blessings, Ma. Her eyes filled with tears. My mother loved her time in Australia and spent 3 months with me. It was one of the most memorable periods of my life because, for the first time, I was hosting my mother. And because she showered the love, care and blessings that only a mother could. She fed me a hearty breakfast every day and I came home to a delicious dinner at night. When I drove to work in the mornings, she would give me a pouch of freshly peeled almonds so I could eat them on the way while driving. As I left the house, she would come out with me to say bye. This was the first time in Australia that someone cared enough to see me off and wait at home for me when I returned. In the past 2 years, I had almost forgotten that I was not a machine but a human being. Her little caring gestures made me feel human again. In those days, I was putting in long hours at work. There were times I came home only to sleep, but my mother never complained. I was unable to show her around the city in the way that I had wanted because I was always pressed for time, but she never made me feel guilty. I'm just happy to see you happy, she would say. One day, while I was sitting with her and talking about life in Australia, I said, Don't get me wrong, Ma, I love it here. This country has offered me so much, but to tell you the truth, my heart is not here. Why, Amit, what's the matter? I opened up to her and told her how I missed putting those hours into my meditation, how I wanted to further my sadhana, but just didn't have the time. I understood the role of education, and I wasn't discounting the importance of money, but this was certainly not going to be the totality of my life. My goal had always been, and still remained, God. I wish to lead a more spiritual life one day, I said. Whatever gives you happiness, she said softly. I just know you'll never make a thoughtless move. I wasn't surprised at her acceptance of my statement, nor did she encourage me to hanker after more money or status. She had always been ever supportive and understanding, as if she knew my innermost feelings. While we were talking, Rajan walked into the room and said, You guys always scare me with your serious conversations. I grinned at him. Ma, how come you always say yes to whatever Amit says? Ma just smiled, but he was right. Beyond our temporary disagreements on minor issues, there had never been any conflict in my relationship with my mother. It could be because she never really opposed me, or because she understood me completely, or both. Rajan interrupted my flow of thoughts as he started mimicking a couple of Australians he had met that day. I had a hearty laugh because that was not how they spoke at all, but, coming from Rajan, Every word was comedic. Before we knew it, it was time for our mother to go back to India. Rajan stayed back as he had been sponsored by a company and now had a work visa. After she left, I felt terrible because I had barely spent time with her. She had not come here to see my car and my flat, the buildings and the tourist attractions. She had come to see me. In December, I finished my bachelor's degree, 6 months in advance. A 3-year degree that was reduced to 2 years, because of the exemptions eventually got completed in 18 months, because I did the additional subjects in summer and as well as winter school. My life was finally stable now, with my basic education complete and a steady income coming in. Since I had arrived in Australia, I hadn't really had the time to focus on myself, on my inner life. My sadhana had not intensified or improved. Now, as things settled around me, the void that had always been within, but veiled briefly by my external pursuits, bared itself to me again. My goal of renunciation was clear to me, and I knew exactly where I was headed, but it wasn't time yet. I had to be certain I wasn't choosing the spiritual path as an escape from the material challenges of the world. 2. Achieve the pinnacle of material success, and then to walk away would be a far truer renunciation. If I had nothing to lose in the first place, what was I renouncing? I wanted to make sure my intent for spiritual life was clear and pure. But I wondered if working for others was the way forward. No matter how much I made as an employee, I would have to work till I retired. And if I continued to work this way, when would I have the time to explore my own soul? Driving a convertible sports car to work didn't have the same charm now as it had in the first couple of months. My paycheck, which had got me so excited earlier, felt like an ordinary piece of paper. The routine was starting to feel boring, and I realized I needed to make some changes. It occurred to me that what I did for IWN, I could easily do for myself. I figured that building my own business would be an interesting and rewarding venture now. IWN gave me a Christmas bonus of $2,000 after I earned more than $2 million in revenue for them. I came home and showed Rajan the check. "Wow, let's celebrate," he said. "Absolutely, but first I have to send an important email." I wrote to Dan and then turned off my phone. "Okay, let's go for a movie and a dinner. I really want to celebrate today." At the restaurant, I kept staring at the menu and chuckling to myself. "What's the matter? Why are you laughing?" "You know, brother, life's like a menu. We have to make choices, we can't have everything. Even if we can afford it all, even if we want to eat it all, we simply can't. We must pick what delights us and not just order the first item on the menu. Today, I've made a choice too." "I get nervous with your cryptic talks, man. What did you do? What choice? Tell me in plain words." "I quit." "Can I get you some drinks to start with, gentlemen?" the waiter intervened. "In a few minutes, please." Rajan sent him away, staring at me in shock. "You what? You quit? I thought you got a bonus check, not severance." "Payment." The tension on his face made me want to laugh. It was a bonus check, but I emailed my resignation after I came home. "But why?" "Because when I was driving back home today, I had a realization." "What realization? Oh, please say something and say it clearly." "What are you up to? Why don't we order something first?" "No, we are not ordering anything till you tell me why you quit. And what's this realization business?" "Well, so far I've been ordering the first item on the menu. My logic was to achieve what I didn't have so that I could be happy. When I was unemployed, I wanted to be a programmer. When I became a programmer, I aimed to be a software architect. Then I became a technical lead, a technical manager, a technical director, and finally a CTO. I guess this policy has served me till now, but I'd be a dunce to continue like this. Am I happy? Is this what I want to do?" "No, brother, no. This is not what I want to do, and this is not what I was born to do." In the board meeting today, one of the members was 65 years old and still worried about getting a parking ticket. As he crunched numbers, he was coughing and sick but forced himself to attend the meeting. Why do we earn and why do we learn? What is growth? What is progress? "Can I get you something now, gentlemen?" "A salad, a bruschetta, a Coke and a sparkling water with a slice of lemon," I said. "2 vegetarian pennies for the main, and one of them with bocconcini cheese, please." "Did you want anything else?" I asked Rajan. He shook his head. "I don't want to be like that old board member," I continued. "A dog never becomes the master. I don't wish to be an employee anymore. I want to be my own boss, the captain of my ship." "But what will you do?" I'll start my own business. What about capital? You need an office and a team. How will it all happen? I don't have the answers yet, but I've decided I'll work for 10 more years. I'll retire at 30 no matter what. The only way I can do that is to build my own business. But what if the business doesn't do well? We have no background in business. It doesn't matter, I've decided on a course and nothing can stop me. But what if God has other plans for you? I haven't seen anyone. Retiring at 30. I laughed. This may be God's menu, but I'm the customer here. I'll decide what I want to eat. But what will you do after retiring? I plan to meet the Creator. I would like to see who designed the menu for me. And what does that mean? It means what I just said. I'd like to meet God. What God? What are you talking about? Stop torturing me, Amit. Just say it clearly, please. I want to devote my life to my search for truth. Your whole life. Whatever it takes. What if you change your mind tomorrow? Of course I'll change my mind. The mind is always changing. It's the nature of the beast. What won't change, however, is my resolution. I solemnly declare that I'll retire at 30, exactly 10 years from now. What's the big deal about being 30? By then, I know I'll have earned the money I need, and I'll be ready to move on. Besides, if I can't build a business in 10 years, that means I'm not fit for business. 10 years is long enough to succeed at something. Rajan sat in stunned silence. I nudged him to eat and consoled him as well, saying there were still 10 years to go and that I would always be by his side. The food was served, and for the first time in years I was no longer in a rush. The soft but crunchy bread, the succulent balls of fresh mozzarella in my penny, the taste of fresh greens, the tickle of black pepper, the flavour of dill, I experienced them all. They came one by one and mingled on my tongue in a strange blend of bliss and awareness, and I savoured every bite. I wasn't just eating my food, I certainly wasn't gulping it down, I was experiencing it. Sip by sip, slowly, I enjoyed the sparkling water, its rising bubbles reminding me of the rush of desires in the human mind. They were incessantly rising to the brim, and would continue to do so until the water was flat. But this didn't mean I had to drink hurriedly. Bubbles of ambitions and desires, of situations and circumstances, of thoughts and emotions would keep rushing in, but I still had the choice to enjoy my drink, one sip at a time at my own pace. Those bubbles were good, they were even necessary. They were not to be loathed but enjoyed, for they had made the flat water sparkle in the first place. Porch and Maury, it was time to start my own IT consulting business. I could not afford an office or a team, so I started out in my own apartment, with barely any capital. I was certain of making it big, but my plans got a big jolt when I ran from pillar to post and failed to get a contract from my existing contacts. This was because the internet bubble had just burst, the financial markets were in the doldrums, consumer sentiment was weak, and corporate spending was at an all-time low. To make matters worse, I realized that I had practically no knowledge of starting or building a business. I had mistakenly thought that my technical competence was sufficient to generate business. Well, it was. To make up for my lack of skills and learn some formal tricks of the trade, I enrolled for an MBA program at the University of Technology in Sydney. 4 months later, I saw a contract opportunity with Eclipse Group, a web design enterprise and a fully owned subsidiary of Deloitte Consulting, one of the world's top 5 consulting firms. A meeting with their CEO, Michael Keane, was arranged. At the meeting, I learnt that Eclipse Group wanted to generate more revenue from software rather than from web design. This was because there was more money in software. Software was my area of specialization, of course, and I didn't think this was a coincidence. They signed me up at $1,000 per day to grow and lead the software development practice. I accompanied Mike to most executive meetings and presentations. The reason customers liked me, they said, was because I fearlessly spoke my mind. I didn't follow the usual method, where consultants simply endorsed the decisions the client had already made. My role was instrumental in securing more business from General Motors and dairy farmers. Both were multi-billion-dollar organizations, the former being much bigger. When I assessed the technology blueprint of the two companies, I told the CIOs at both organizations that they were wasting money by buying a particular software, a content management solution. A few months later, Mike invited me for a coffee at the Crown Plaza in Melbourne. Coming to the point quickly, he said wanted me to think about taking on a bigger role, something more permanent at Deloitte. He went on to say that he was retiring and looking for a successor to head Eclipse Group. Clearly, he was hinting at a career for me at Deloitte, but I didn't want employment. I was still quiet when he said, "You know what our biggest challenge is?" I said, "In terms of clients." "No, in terms of you." I smiled. "You see, our biggest challenge is to find a challenge for you." I was deeply impressed at his reading. It was true. Whenever something stopped challenging me, I would just move on. And do you know what the biggest challenge for you is? To stay motivated. Maybe, but the real challenge for you will be to pick the right option. Life is going to present you with many choices, and obviously your future will depend on your choices. His profound statement, laced with wisdom, has stayed with me. Meanwhile, my consulting practice grew. I hired a small team and invested every single cent of my profits in the development of an enterprise search engine. It was like Google, but meant only for companies. Over the next 2 years, I got my Australian permanent residency, finished my MBA, set up a software development center in India, and traveled to New York to start a branch office. The New York operation, however, didn't do as well as I had expected, and Sydney needed my attention, so I curtailed my ambition and focused more on my Australian operations. Revenues from the Australian business flowed in, and I was keen to invest them in areas other than just product development. A year later, in 2003, I decided to start an office in Silicon Valley. I needed an infusion of institutional capital to take my product to the broader market segment. I also needed someone to manage my Australian operations. I had met Andy at a client's and we had become friends. We often played chess together. I hired him to work for me. He wanted to build his own company, so we agreed that while looking after my business, Andy could also work on his own product, unrelated to our offerings, so that there was no conflict of interest. After all, that's how Deloitte had supported me. I shifted to California temporarily, leaving the reins of the Australian operations in Andy's hands. After staying in a serviced apartment for a few weeks, I moved in with Ashwani Verma, a distant cousin, and his wife Monica. They opened the doors of their home as well as their hearts for me. A great support, they helped me take my mind off work. I spent a few months in California pitching my company to various venture capitalists. Back in Australia, however, we didn't close any major deals in my absence. With mounting expenses in India and California, I unexpectedly found myself in the middle of a severe cash crunch. Finally, DFJ, a Tier 1 venture capital firm in Silicon Valley, showed interest in investing. After I presented to all the partners in the firm, I was certain that the funding of $7 million was on its way. A couple of days after the presentation, my phone rang. It was Josh Stein, my contact at DFJ. My mouth went dry. I knew he was going to talk about the terms sheet. God had materialized the money for me. Josh spoke for a couple of minutes, but I couldn't register anything he said. I was just waiting to hear the good news. Finally, his words came through. "Unfortunately, other partners are not keen at this time, but I think you have a great product and you should pursue other investors." He said some other things that I don't remember. I was shattered. I had no other real tangible leads. I called Keith for consolation. Keith Taylor, in his late 40s, was a good friend and the chief financial officer, CFO of a startup in Silicon Valley. I had met him through an online reference soon after arriving in the US. He had helped me with the financial model for raising equity along with the venture capital pitches. Soon, we were meeting every Sunday morning for a coffee and a sandwich. He told me not to worry and that I would find some other leads, but I was completely lost. I spoke to Ashwani and he suggested I take a break. I had been working day and night across 3 time zones for the last several months. I also called Aaron, who had moved from Sydney to Toronto 2 years ago. He asked me to visit him for a few days. I boarded the next flight to Toronto. The city was a good change for me. We went out Friday evening and the entire day on Saturday. On Saturday night I checked my email to find one from Andy. It was his resignation letter, stating he would not be coming to work Monday onwards. Monday, he was supposed to give me a month's notice. I called Andy but got his voicemail instead. I left messages but did not receive his call. How could he not honor the notice period? Then it hit me that he had left me exactly the way I had left TTA back in 1998. It was payback time. I immediately thought about my clients and my employees. How would I support them? I had to go to Sydney right away. There were no direct flights available, so I hopped through 4 connections to reach Sydney. This was now October 2004. I had been away for 7 months. Upon reaching Sydney, I found out that the situation was much worse than I had thought. Andy's resignation was only the last nail in the coffin. Much had already happened in my absence. In a direct conflict of interest, Andy had offered my customers the same services through his company. Rumour spread that my company had gone belly up. My major customers jumped ship in panic, thinking they would not get technical support from us any longer. A couple of other customers contracted with Andy's company directly, and all prospective customers shied away. This storm had been quietly raging in Australia, while I had been focusing on raising equity capital in the US, totally unaware of what was going on. I tried to salvage the situation and met with my customers, but it was very hard to win them back. Being unavailable for 7 months was equal to 70 years in the internet age. My clients had lost confidence in me. One customer, a dairy company called Big Cheese, stood by me and asked me to continue the work. They were a small client, but I was happy that I had an active client reference. I also knew that sooner or later, I would sign up new projects, but I needed money right away to keep the India office going. This office formed my technical team and I couldn't do without them, so I decided to sell my assets, including my house. I had been looking for a change of scene in any case and figured this was a good time to move. Canada was my next destination. I wanted to build a business in a bigger economy. By that time, Rajan had been married for over a year to a wonderful person called Pooja. I called her PB, short for Pooja Babhai. PB was like a mother to me and took care of me at every step. Together, Rajan and PB were my backbone. The three of us had lived together in Australia. When I told them I was moving to Canada, they announced they would come with me. "You don't have to move because of me," I protested. "Everything is going so well for you here." "No, Amit, we will live wherever you live. We'll live together," said PB tenderly. "Don't worry about me, I'm fine, seriously. There's no guarantee I'll even stay in Canada. Most likely I'll move to the US. "That's fine, we'll still be closer to you. But why do you want to quit your jobs and take this major step? You know, even though I look up to you, you are still my younger brother," said Rajan. "I can't stop feeling protective about you. I'm concerned about you. I know you can rebuild your business and I want to support you. I'll take care of all the living expenses." "Are you both sure you want to move to Canada?" "Yes," they chorused. "We are where you are, nothing else matters." I laughed heartily. "All right then, tighten your seat belts, kids. We're gonna have one hell of a time in Canada." Then PB asked, "Tell me honestly, you are stressed, aren't you? You want to know the truth, will you believe me?" "Of course." "Then listen carefully. The truth is that I'm greatly relieved. I had stopped stressing on my return flight to Sydney, and I can't be bothered by what is past. I'm happy because I'm free again and I'm ready to build again. I've always enjoyed building more than running. I know exactly what I need to do now. In fact, I've already thought about the car I'm going to buy next year." "Oh really?" PB was always excited about everything I said or did. My brother shook his head disbelievingly. Tell us, which car will you buy next year?" I turned my laptop towards them. "Oh my God, a Porsche," PB clapped in excitement. "Yes, I was already selecting the model." "I know you'll do it," said PB. "Can we come back to Earth, Amit, if you don't mind?" Rajan said. "We've just sold our house and everything else of any monetary value. We're in a grave situation here. Don't you think we should be a little practical?" I laughed again. "Watch me, brother, wait till you see me in action. Before the end of next year, I promise I'll have this seal grey baby. Not financed, rented or leased, but a fully owned car." "I know he'll do it," PB exclaimed. "You guys are unbelievable," Rajan muttered in exasperation. "Well, we'll revisit this topic next year and then you tell me," I said. "Oh, the lion's injured but hasn't forgot to hunt," Rajan said. "Porsche bro, Porsche next year, a Porsche parked in our own house." "All right, I want to celebrate this promise. I want to celebrate our car and new house in advance. Put that black dress on, PB. We're going for the finest Italian cuisine in town." Rajan and PB moved to Canada first. I had to stay back for at least 6 weeks to wrap things up. I started hunting for a small, short-term contract to better utilize my time. 6 weeks was too brief a period, but I wasn't prepared to waste even a moment. I had to get back on my feet and earn my livelihood again. This was another opportunity that destiny was throwing my way, and I could have easily renounced the world now. In fact, I was tempted to. Yet a part of me knew clearly that to do so at this time would be escapism. It would also be an untrue renunciation because, almost penniless, what did I have to renounce anyway? I also wanted to build from scratch to prove to myself that the first time round wasn't a fluke. I wanted to be sure that I did indeed have the competence and conviction to script my own destiny. A few days later, New South Wales Police NSWP offered me a senior role, asking me to lead the software architecture team working on a police investigation system. It was a 3-month contract with an extension of equal duration, which meant I would have to stay back for 6 months. Staying the additional months also fulfilled the criteria for acquiring my Australian citizenship, something I looked forward to. I felt a certain loyalty towards Australia because this country had extended to me every opportunity to further myself, to spread my wings and fly high. It had given me quality education and just the right social and professional environment. This was also a good opportunity to rebuild my business, sign on new customers and regain my confidence. I took up the role NSWP was offering me. Going through my Rolodex, I called everyone I knew, and out of those calls came opportunities worth many thousands of dollars. I signed on other customers. In July 2005, a mere 7 months later, I moved to Canada as a millionaire. A week later, a seal grey top-model Porsche Carrera 4S was parked in the garage of our 4-bedroom house in Canada. I launched a marketing campaign to develop my business and signed up 7 new customers within a span of 5 weeks. An associate company now looked after my customers in Australia. I built a customer base in India and also signed on small customers in the US. Cash was flowing, profits were good, and I was back in business. I was ready to take a break now, and there was no better way than to take the Porsche for a spin. I decided to go on a 4-week circuit ranging the East Coast. I turned my phone off and just drove, stopping wherever I felt like. From golf resorts in Ontario to spa resorts in the eastern townships of Quebec, from there to Boston and back, I explored many places. These were not the highlights of the trip though. On my way to New York, I got a speeding ticket and promised myself I would behave for the rest of the trip. This was a promise I broke promptly, but I ended up having an experience of a lifetime, creating a memory I would never forget. It happened on a highway in Vermont. No, I didn't meet with an accident, but I think I lost my sanity for a minute when I chose to step on the gas and reach a speed of 28 km per hour. My eyes were locked on the road ahead, and there was no time to see the scenery that went past in a blur. I remember thinking of Einstein after I slowed down to the legal speed limit. Time was truly relative. At 28 km per hour, even though I was at that speed for no more than 30 seconds, I felt I had lived through a lifetime. At the core of the thrill was a sense of deep fear. A lapse in concentration for even a couple of seconds could have resulted in complete disaster, but the anticipation of the thrill had completely overridden my reason. I remember feeling compelled to step on the gas. Interestingly, at that fast and illegal speed, I ended up having an eternal and legitimate experience, the experience of unusual stillness and remarkable awareness. That is why every second felt so much longer to me, and those moments were filled with the most intense quietude. The faster I'd gone, the quieter it had become. 2 weeks later, I turned on the phone to inform my brother that I was well, and found I had quite a few voicemails. One of them was a message about my sister, who was admitted to a hospital because she had been having seizures and convulsions. She had been asking for me. I felt terrible. Here I was, having turned off my phone so I could have fun and be undisturbed, only to discover my sister had really needed me and I had not been available. I first spoke to Mother and then called Dee. She was still in the hospital. The MRI had revealed a tumor in her brain. I cut short my vacation, put everything on hold and took the next flight to India. I rushed to the hospital in Patiala as soon as I landed in New Delhi. She hugged me tight and cried, "I've missed you so much, I've thought about you every moment. I was dying to hear your voice just once." "I'm sorry, Dee, I'd turned off my phone for a few days. Will I be okay?" "Just okay, I promise you'll feel even better than before." "I'm worried about Dak, she's only 8, he needs me," she began sobbing. "Why are you talking like this, Dee? I promise you everything will be just fine, nothing will happen to you, what am I here for?" I kissed her head, I kissed her forehead, I kissed her cheeks, I hugged her tight till she calmed down. I promised her I would not leave India till she had completely recovered. Her husband, Suvi, and I took her to Delhi. The chief neurosurgeon recommended immediate surgery. There's a 1% chance of loss of life, 2% chance of loss of memory, and 13% chance of loss of vision, the surgeon said. You need to sign here to indicate you understand and accept this. The surgeon's look had conviction but no assurance or emotion. My brother-in-law's eyes held fear and anxiety. For the first time in my life I had a sinking feeling in my stomach. I had been helpless before, but this was different. If anything went wrong now, there was no road to recovery, no way of making things all right. I had no control over this situation and no medical insights either. But I had one thing which gave me the courage to put my hand on Suvi's shoulder to steady him as he signed. Faith. I had faith, for I knew it was not her time yet. I remember feeling weak as she hugged me before being taken to the operation theatre. A tear rolled down from the corner of her eye as she waved at me quietly. Later, in the ICU, looking at her shaved head, her eyes huge in her round, pale face, she had looked like a beautiful Buddhist nun. I cannot forget how, when she was brought back to the hospital room, she had smiled like a child at the sight of a room full of flowers. But the memory that stays with me is the one where she is back home, healthy and happy, her laughter filling the house, her joie de vivre intact. 3 months later, I went back to Canada and resumed the Canadian operations, signing on many new customers. After that, I shifted to Silicon Valley once more to revive my old contacts, secure new customers and, above all, shop for investors for my new business. In my spare time, I drove around the valley. It was a lovely time of year to be there. I had the chance to meet wonderful people and had many an inspiring conversation with brilliant minds. Keith and I continued to meet on Sundays. One day, I happened to get an email from a person called Atul Sharma. Professionally, I had known Atul from my New York days when he was a vice president with Lehman Brothers. At this time, he was a senior executive with Barclays Bank in London. Atul wrote about his upcoming plan that involved large-scale banking projects with leading web technologies. On top of his agenda was innovation engineering. He wanted to roll out software that enabled better internal and external communication among the various stakeholders. We gave him an online demo of my search product, and he immediately saw the potential. The product could take data warehousing and business intelligence to an entirely new level. Atul asked me to establish a presence in London. He was a sharp and incredibly driven individual. Clients like him were vital for a startup like mine. Being in London also meant I could explore the European market since I already had small customers in Denmark, Norway and Holland. In December 2006, I moved to London. Barclays turned out to be a major customer, but this relationship was short-lived, the result of a sudden management change at Barclays coupled with the financial market crisis. This was June 2007. Now I finally paused and took a long look at myself. I still had to discover the truth of my existence. My desire to meet God was waiting to be fulfilled. This life I was living at the moment was good, was even true, but this was not the only truth and certainly not the eternal truth I longed for. It was time to move back to India. It was time to find my God. I sold my Porsche and gave the proceeds to some ISKCON devotees I knew in Australia. I had enjoyed it just as I had enjoyed all my other possessions. I will not deny that I had taken great pleasure in my wealth and luxurious lifestyle. It was a delight to stay at the suite in the W Hotel in New York or at the Royal Mirage in Dubai, have high tea at the Ritz-Carlton in London, and savor vegetarian meals in San Francisco, pastas in Venice and desserts in Paris. I flew business class wherever I went and travelled a great deal. I visited stunning locales in Switzerland, rejuvenating spa resorts in California, beaches in Australia and mountains in New Zealand. I enjoyed having a cook and a cleaner and someone to launder my designer clothes. I wore shirts made from ultrafine cotton with my customized business suits. Expensive and elegant watches in graphite metal and sapphire glass completed my ensemble. My wardrobe had the latest outfits from Versace, Armani, Prada, BVLGari, Tag Heuer, Longines, Mont Blanc. Yet wealth had never been my primary focus. Whether big or small, a goal once attained turns into a mere experience and then just a memory. My luxurious lifestyle had been a stepping stone in my journey. I knew very well that material success did not make me who I was, it did not define me in any way, and I was ready to give it all up now. The universe, however, didn't seem ready just yet. From London, I went for a short vacation to Canada before moving back to India. There I met a man called Vivek Dhume, an acquaintance of Rajan's. I liked him instantly. "It's my dream to do something in India," he said at our first meeting. I said, well, I'm going to India permanently. Will you be doing some business there? Not really. I just want to take a break. I may do some stock trading to keep me busy. Well, won't it be nice if we did something for India? He said. Yes, but I have a different goal. Can you share it with me? How about over a bite tomorrow? We met the following day in a quiet restaurant called Zen Garden, where they served great vegetarian food. You see, Vivek, I'm financially taken care of and don't have the pressure of working to sustain myself. I've seen whatever I wanted to see in terms of material comforts and have no more desires on that front. Now I want to devote my life to self-discovery and realization. I'm going to renounce and become an ascetic. Vivek stopped eating. We were the only customers in the restaurant. Complete silence ensued. You mean you'll renounce as in renounce, like become a sadhu? Yes. After a long pause he asked, when will you do this? I'm glad he didn't ask me why I was going to renounce. There was no answer to that question. I can't disclose the date, but I can tell you it'll be within the next 3 years. You mean you'll actually leave everything and put on a robe? Yes. But what about the next 3 years? I'm going to India to spend some time with my parents, so you won't work at all. I'll be 28 soon and I'm open to working till I'm 30. In fact, I'm sitting on substantial savings, and I don't mind investing the money in a new venture since I plan to give it up anyway. It's better to use it for creating employment for others than just leaving it the way it is. But why did you earn it in the first place if you knew you would leave it all one day? I never focused on earning it, Vivek. I was simply doing my karma, growing my business, and I was enjoying it. Money was not my goal, it was merely the consequence of intelligent decisions. Now I wish to go in solitude and do intense sadhana. Will you never come back from your sadhana? I will, I just don't know when. It depends on how long it takes me to attain that transcendental state. After you come back, won't you need a place to stay? Yes, I will. And you will have living expenses once you come back, right? That's right. So why don't we build something in India? We can invest equally. You can renounce as per your plan but let the business pay you a stipend every month once you come back, he proposed. We'll make a little place for you in the mountains. The idea sounded good. This way I could always remain independent. I asked who will run the business. I can set it up and make it profitable, but I won't be there to run it. I'll run it. You mean you'll move to India? Yes. With your family? Yes. Are you sure, positive? I ate my tofu thoughtfully while Vivek watched me. Neither of us spoke for a while. I said, you do know that I will go away, Vivek, and I will only return once I attain my goal. I believe you. So long as we are clear, I said. I'll leave as soon as the business is profitable. Fine. I'll renounce my wealth to you for you, a little gift. He was speechless. When he finally found his voice, he said, why me, Amit? Why not leave it for your family? I guess you'll find out one day. No, I can't take so much from you. I've already decided this, Vivek. Anyway, we'll see to it later. No, I'm serious. I want to renounce properly. We have to settle it now. Please don't expect me to be a part of the business once I walk away. He was quiet again. I knew this was neither my plan nor Vivek's. It was the universe's way of doing things. What else could explain two people meeting for the first time and not only sharing their financials, but pledging their entire corpus of savings? We had started our discussion over our entrees, and everything was finalized before we ordered dessert. The renunciation the following day, Vivek and I met to work out the details of our business. We had decided we would do something together, but neither of us actually knew what we were going to do. He suggested growing my software business, but I was bored with software. I had done it for nearly 10 years now. The cafe where we were sitting was full of customers and rather noisy. We decided to take a stroll and find a quiet place. Just a few shops down was a juice bar. It had no customers. We sat down and ordered a couple of smoothies. Looking around, Vivek said suddenly, you know, there are no juice bars like this in India. There are, but only in the big cities, I reckon, but I haven't seen any chain of juice bars. There are numerous roadside carts offering juices. Yes, but what about a premium offering for those who care about health and hygiene? You know, it doesn't sound like a bad idea. We brainstormed for an hour, and without any further market research, decided that we would start a chain of juice bars in India. I wasn't sure if it was our casual attitude towards money or faith in each other that allowed us to simply put our chips on a business we had no knowledge of whatsoever. We agreed that I would start this enterprise in India and build the team, while Vivek would join me 2 years later. In September 2007, I moved back to India. My parents were living in the same old house. My father was still driving his old scooter. The TV, sound system, furniture, everything looked old and shabby. All these years I had travelled to India but had completely failed to notice how my parents were living. A deep sense of guilt washed over me. Even with all my wealth, I had been of no use to my parents. I couldn't make up for the past, but I could build for the present. I bought them a new house, furniture, gadgets, and everything else I thought they might like. I bought them 2 new cars and hired a full-time driver as well. I didn't want them to use the scooter any longer. But with all this came a realization: objects don't make up for what objects can't make up for. My father, a simple man, cared little about gadgets and cars. Both he and my mother were used to leading a certain life. After all, they had always lived that way. My arrangements had come a little too late. My father continued to use his old scooter most of the time. When I asked him about this, he said simply, "You're back to live in India. What more can we ask for?" Repeatedly, Ma expressed how happy she was to have me back and to be able to feed me again. Seeing their happiness, I could not muster up the courage to share with them the fact that this joy was short-lived and that I was going to leave in the foreseeable future. I only shared my business plans with them. Even though my mother had never opposed me and my father always supported me, I couldn't figure out how to start this conversation. Besides, I was getting increasingly busy with building the new business and didn't manage to find an appropriate moment to broach the topic. Meanwhile, my software business was still obliged to fulfill its current and active contracts with customers in Canada, Australia, Holland, and the US. I wanted to focus on the new business as, this time, it was not just about my savings but Vivek's as well. I wanted to do a thorough job and come through. So I began wrapping up my software business in North America, Australia and India, which, due to the nature of customer contracts, was an 18-month process. Meanwhile, Vivek and I also acquired an Ayurvedic healthcare company. Engaging a team of top doctors in the industry, we came up with a product range of 7 unique health boosters. The company broke even within the first 18 months. Vivek moved back with his family in the third quarter of 2009. The company was turning around fast. By the end of that year, the company was in profit. In fact, we had several current orders and many more worth millions of dollars in the pipeline. I gently reminded Vivek that I would leave soon. Another couple of months later, we saw a block of land in the mountains. Vivek and I stood on that land and thought it was a good place to be in after I returned from my sadhana. I told him that my only requirement was a meditation hall, around 10 small rooms, a kitchen and a small cottage. But he gave me a bigger vision. "We'll have nice pathways here with fragrant creepers growing along both sides. There can also be trees arching over the paths. We'll have trees as windbreaker around the periphery of the property and a pond in the middle. I'll get a special type of feed which, once placed in pots hung from the trees, will attract all sorts of coloured birds. We'll also have special meditation huts with thatched roofs, and it would be lovely to have deer running around. This place is going to be a heaven on earth." We finalised the deal for the land. On the way back from the mountains, Vivek and I discussed the monthly stipend the company would pay me and settled on Rs10,000. This was just a fraction, less than 2% of what I would have earned had I invested my capital in a low-interest secure financial instrument like a term deposit, but it was enough for my needs. I made a trip to Australia and Canada in late 2009 to meet my friends and family. My mother was in Canada visiting Rajan at the time. I wanted to see everyone once before marking my departure from the material world. I didn't know when they would be able to see me again. One evening I was alone with my mother. "You know, Ma, soon I'll leave for sadhana." She turned pale. "You already do sadhana, you sit in meditative absorption all the time, you have everything, my son. Why do you still want to go away?" "You are right, Ma, but God forbid should something untoward happen to you or my other loved ones. The pain I experience will be far deeper than any sentiment I may feel at losing someone I don't care about or don't know. This means I'm still attached, still biased. I want to feel the same pain and the same love for all beings. To become impartial or, putting it another way, to have unconditional love for all, I need to be in solitude for." A while, plus the vision of God I had earlier was dreamlike, Ma. I want something more concrete, more real. As always, I don't have any response to your statements. All I have is this faith in you that you'll only take the right step, whatever it may be. I put my head in her lap. I knew this was the last time I would have this opportunity to experience my mother's love. It would not be possible after renunciation. In her incredible acceptance of my decision, I also saw deep pain, but my resolve did not break. I did what I had to because this was the only way I saw to quench the thirst of my soul. Maybe Prof. Sharma was right after all. I was all head and no heart. I came back to India. In my drafts folder quietly sat the painful departure notes I had written for my loved ones while in Canada. Each note basically said that I was sorry for leaving them in this way, but I had to take this step. I had long wanted to do this, and it was all I wanted from my life. I got power of attorneys drafted for my personal as well as company assets. I left Vivek with exclusive control and transferred my assets in his name. The lawyer advised me against this, but his job, I told him, was to execute and not advise. I could have given my wealth to my beloved family, but I felt that this wouldn't be true renunciation. On 15 March 2010, I gave my father a tight hug before leaving the house. I had breakfast at my sister's place and said goodbye to her. At work, I had a normal day. I printed letters and sealed envelopes. I made handover notes. I wrote checks for some people out of the funds still sitting in my account. I wanted to give away every last penny I had and only live off the stipend money. Some investments were in a lock-in period, so I couldn't liquidate them. Meanwhile, I had informed my bankers a couple of months ago of my decision and made sure there were no debts to be cleared. My parents were financially secure as they both received pensions. My siblings were also comfortably off. My employees would be looked after by Vivek. I had a nice lunch with Manik, a senior manager in our company and a good friend. I told him I wanted to enjoy that day, and we went for a coffee. Vivek was out of town for a customer meeting. In the evening, I called Sandeep, my driver, who brought the car around. Railway station, I said. Sandeep was an extremely trustworthy person and quite attached to me. We had had many moments of laughter in the past 30 months. As he drove, we were both silent. I wasn't thinking about the present or the future. I wasn't thinking at all. I was simply quiet, the way I had been when I was leaving for Australia. These moments when you are aware but not thinking are blessed. After a while, I let the thoughts enter. I reflected on the people I was about to leave and people I had already left behind. I had had my share of relationships, both platonic and intimate. Until I was about 25, I had absolutely no time for anything other than my immediate priorities, work and meditation. Gradually, it had dawned on me that I had missed something very important. I had not experienced myself completely. I had studied about Purusha and Prakriti, Shiva and Shakti, Yin and Yang. I had studied Tantra and done tantric practices, but my understanding of sexual union in Tantra was superficial. I had no practical experience. Always influenced by religious principles, I used to think that celibacy was essential for self-realization, a view I later found to be baseless and erroneous. I had known many girls and some had wanted me, but I had been driven by my own beliefs and wasn't ready for intimacy. It was also true that I didn't really feel the need for relationships. I had tried to reciprocate. I had cared about certain people, loved them even. But I couldn't feel any attachment to them. Their presence or absence didn't make any difference to my state of mind. The trouble is, one girl had said, there's nothing I can offer you because you have no needs. She wasn't entirely wrong. My heart was always in the Himalayas. I longed to experience the state the Buddha had realized, the state yogic scriptures talked about, the transcendence the Vedas preached, the samadhi the ancient sages talked of. My samskaras' innate tendencies continuously pulled me towards that state of being. The more wealth I created, the stronger this urge got, for I couldn't understand what the fuss about money was. I'd tasted money, attention, fame and relationships, and become clear about the fact that none of these things could fill the void within. Marriage was not a part of my plan or my dreams either. I knew I would renounce one day, and therefore I thought it would be unethical to consummate the relationship. Once again, I was rather naive in my thinking. I had always seen life in black and white, believing in absolute definitions. This was good and that was bad. This was moral and that was immoral. This was right and that was wrong. How Tantra used sexuality to transform and transcend the self was not something I really grasped until I experienced it firsthand when I did my first tantric sadhana of goddess Kali. and I learnt that life was really a huge grey sea. Doing this particular tantric sadhana was supposed to give the practitioner a vision of Kali in a vivid dream. A process of 3 nights, it required invoking a mantra along with the energy of Kali in one's partner. Honestly, I wasn't sure if a short sadhana would result in anything significant, but how wrong I was. Not only did I get a vision of Kali, but at the time of consummation, I felt like the only entity that existed in the entire universe. Why, I felt I was the universe. It was an experience unlike any other. Physical intimacy didn't hurt my conscience or my sadhana. On the contrary, it was incredibly beautiful and liberating. Any notion of sex or sexuality I had held was now transformed into an expression of love, a way of experiencing oneness. If I had any inhibitions about it earlier, I had none now. I even remember sitting down later and analyzing why such a beautiful act was labeled a sin in the major religions. If you had sex within a societal or religious framework like marriage, it was acceptable, but if you dared to venture beyond, it was considered a sin. Who had made these rules? Some Hindu scriptures did not view sex so negatively. Nevertheless, they regarded it as a great hindrance towards one's spiritual progress, because lust can easily override one's intelligence and resolve. They argued that a seeker on the path must be chaste, he or she must be steadfast in practicing celibacy, so they do not become prey to temptations. I could see some sense in this, but what about the seeker who had reached the other shore? I couldn't see the wisdom in a lifelong vow of abstinence. Further, I thought it was unnatural and unnecessary. Besides, Tantra offered a phenomenal way of transforming sex into a divine offering, and the only significant difference between ordinary sex and sex the Tantric way is mindfulness. Tantra insists on awareness, the awareness of each breath, thought, and emotion. Sexual desire can destroy awareness effortlessly. When overcome by lust, all boundaries between right and wrong, between good and bad, blur very quickly. But tantric mindfulness turns even lust into an awareness of emotion, it transforms it into love. This is a subtle but powerful transformation because the next time any sexual thoughts occur, you don't experience a tide of lust but a wave of love. And this is no ordinary feat but an extraordinary metamorphosis. You have just successfully transformed one of the most powerful and innate human urges into a divine emotion. My experience brought home the understanding that love was undoubtedly the most powerful emotion, a wholesome expression of one's very existence. I realized there was no other emotion as complete and as healing as love. Even compassion may be a conscious choice, but love is the basis of our existence, and therefore strikes a chord in our innermost being. This is why the Vedas recommended the slow and steady path to self-realization rather than an abrupt or early renunciation. They endorsed the institution of marriage, a life of moderation, the middle way. It all made sense to me now. I understood why the greatest sages were married, why even Krishna, Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma had consorts. The message here was not that marriage would bring self-realization, but that it could work as a catalyst for spiritual transformation. This is what the greatest seers and yogis had grasped. Essentially, a householder leading a truthful life and experiencing the various colors of life in moderation could reach the highest state of realization far quicker than a celibate tucked away in a religious order, but constantly battling with his emotions. Sex was not an experience to be fought and despised, but to be understood and accepted. My views about marriage, however, did not change. Love was good, physical intimacy was good, but I didn't want marriage. I was also aware that a successful stint at Tantra didn't mean I had experienced the ultimate state, or that I had become an adept or even an expert meditator. One vision of Kali wasn't enough for me. I wanted to see the divine again and again. Further, I had not yet attained the perfect stillness of the mind. During my meditations, my mind still wandered off. 19 years had gone since I first started meditating, and here I was, not much better than when I started. Over time, I had become convinced that I needed a guru. Perhaps surrender to a guru was the way forward. A guru would be able to guide me and lead me to the ultimate state I so longed to reach. I genuinely believed that I wasn't getting ahead in my sadhana because I hadn't been initiated into the path of renunciation. Sirji, Sandeep called me again. I looked at him. We are at the railway station, Sirji.